Hello and welcome to a Rental Rodeo live cast. Well, I guess we should just immediately get started with this. So let me get to the introductions here. I am Snarboo, and with me are my co-hosts Dyer51 and Sotenga. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah. So Tanga, why don't you go first?
Alrighty, I'm Sotenga. I stream on Twitch like 2 or 3 nights a week with various stuff. Last game I played was Mega Man 7, mostly a great game, except the final boss sucked. So, yeah.
And I'm Dyer51. I've worn many hats when it comes to classic gaming and whatnot over the
Right.
years. I'm the webmaster of West Mansion the Splatterhouse. Wrote a book a while back called Memoirs of a Virtual Caveman, which Sotanga also contributed to. And currently, I'm half of the Dyer and Betty YouTube channel. The other half being my wife, Betty.
All right. I can lead this off with a little bit of a joke. So I was going to say that I'm the only person in this call that is not a published author. Then I realized my Biohazard Battle article for HD101 made it into one of the shmup books. So technically, I'm the only non-self-published person in this call. But yes, as for the rental rodeo, well, I knew I wanted to start streaming a little while back. I had been on a hiatus for probably close to 5, 6 years, and I just wanted a nice simple gimmick. And I noticed that I had a folder just dedicated to all the games I rented. I thought that was a nice way of sort of separating my collection of stuff. So if I just wanted to look at something really weird or oddball, I could dive into that folder. And I realized that's actually not a bad, stream format. Just going back and playing those games, streaming them for others, trying to describe what it was like renting those games. But I didn't go over rental culture, or I haven't gone over rental culture too much with it, other than describing my experiences with the game. So I figured an entire live cast just about our experiences was, you know, it basically needed to be done. I had done like 9 episodes. I figured this would be a good season ender, quote unquote, for that until I start the rental rodeo again. So okay, so you
All right.
wanted me
So
to,
that's a good idea.
yeah. So you wanted me to ask you lead this off with a question for you, Dyer.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Well, this might be a little banal, but or banal. I can't remember which it is. But okay, what is your first rental store memory, and what did you rent first?
Oh, geez. Well, let's see. I know I'm a bit older than both you and Satanga. So my first memory would have been one of the first video stores that opened in our area. And at the time, I was living in southeastern Connecticut. And there was a video store. It was maybe a 15-minute drive from where I lived. And they not only rented VHS, but they rented CED movies. And I distinctly remember going there and being allowed to choose a movie to rent. And the one I rented was only the second greatest movie that ever existed, Raiders of the Lost Ark. And that's what everyone watched for the next couple of days. I probably watched it more than the rest of them, but yeah, some chips gotta fall.
Do you remember how many times you viewed it?
Well, I know let's see, I'd get home from school and watch it. And if I had time after that, I'd watch it again. And if no one was taking the TV up that night, I'd usually watch it again.
Cool.
I do distinctly remember my mother used to watch stuff like Love Connection and things like that. And she'd take a nap in the afternoon. So one night she gets up and it's almost time for Love Connection, a half hour or so. So I said, okay, well, can I just watch the movie until you're ready to watch your show? And she's like, okay. And the thing about CDs is you had to actually flip them over for the second half of the movie.
Yeah.
So we get to the stopping point, and she's like, all right, go ahead and turn it off. Like, but you're still like 20 minutes left. I can watch 20 minutes of the next side. She's like, no, turn it off. And I was very young. I didn't take that very well, so I wasn't in a good mood that night.
No, nuts.
Okay, so you mentioned CED and having to flip the disc over. What exactly is a CED?
A CED was a video format that was basically dead in the water by 1980. It was it's a CED stands for capacitance electronic disc, and it's basically movies on vinyl.
So, as in a
And
record?
yeah, exactly.
And this dumb question: did this come before or after the Laserdisc?
I think, well, let's see. I know the format wars and tapes killed it because tapes were easier to uh, manufacture.
Mm.
Laserdisc, I think, came about shortly after that. I'm not 100% sure.
What happened to the Laserdisc? Laserdisc.
It's still around. But now CDs, they basically, the units were huge. It was like, imagine having an enclosed record player. And the movies themselves were enclosed in these huge plastic cases. And you'd slide it into the player, and then it would go ahead and, the stylus would come out and start reading the vinyl, which was exposed inside the player. They were very fragile, very prone to breakage, and that's one of the main reasons they failed, from what I've gathered.
Right.
Yes.
If I was,
Dicey.
yeah, and I can tell you, I actually own a CED, but not a player. I
Ooh.
did buy a copy of Raiders of the Lost Ark for my personal collection.
Yeah, Dyer has an Indiana Jones collection, even for stuff that he can't actually play.
Yeah,
Which I definitely respect, even if I don't think I would do that.
yeah. I can tell you, I've seen people out there have much bigger Indiana Jones collections than me, but
Ooh.
if I ever wanted to play it, I could try and hunt down a CED player, but they're super expensive and they're even more fragile now than they were then, and just shipping alone would kill me.
And if it
Yeah.
breaks, there's not a good way to repair it at this point. Did any
No.
of the other Indiana Jones movies get ported, or not ported? Excuse me, that's a gaming term. Did they get released on CED?
I'm pretty sure that was the only one, because by the time Temple of Doom came out, the CED was basically on the way out.
Oh, right. That would have been closer to mid '80s at that point.
Yeah, it was just 84 is when the movie came out. It didn't hit video until I think the next year. But I will tell you this. The CD copy of Raiders that I bought actually has, on the very bottom of the front of the disc, it actually has a little blurb that says, coming to a theater near you, like May 24th, 1984, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Wow. Well, that dates it pretty handily.
Yeah. And which actually plays into one of the VHS tapes from childhood I still own, which is Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Okay. Well,
And it has the same blurb on the cover of that.
very consistent.
Yes.
So they
Even
must
back
have
then.
come out about the same time. Oh yeah.
Okay,
But
so
yeah,
okay, go ahead.
I was gonna say, almost everyone I knew owned a CD player, which was weird. And I think there was enough of a user base in that part of Connecticut where video store actually there was enough demand to rent out CDs.
Okay, that's what I was about to ask you, is how the store came to rent those out, because truthfully, I was only familiar with like two major formats, Beta and VHS at the time. There was Laserdisc too, but I don't know if that was ever rented out or not.
Not that I ever saw,
Probably too expensive, yeah.
but I distinctly remember the video store the way it was set up. It's like up on the walls where they had all the tapes. I don't know if they rented Beta or not, but they definitely had VHS. Although their supply was pretty limited at the time compared to CED. But in the center of the main room and kind of ringing it on the bottom like a record store were all these shelves that had all the CEDs in them. Yeah, and you can go and flip through them just like you were flipping through a stack of vinyls.
Ooh.
That's really interesting. Now, did the CD suffer from warpage like a traditional vinyl, or
Well, I'm sure if you left it out in the sun, it probably would. But
okay.
again, they weren't just like the vinyl discs by themselves. They were enclosed in those plastic cases.
Right, okay, so it was like an early Blu-ray disc, or even early CDs I think had caddies too.
These weren't actually just caddies, though. They actually were like combination storage protection for the vinyl inside.
Wow.
and you put the whole thing into the player.
I
Okay.
can't believe it ate the whole. I'll shut up now. I'll note on the side that at this point that my memory is worse than Snarb's and Dyer's, and I'm not as personally sentimental a person, so I'm mostly sitting in here to provide flavor commentary. I can't say that I have nearly as many rental memories to share. If something does come to mind, I will bring it up, certainly, but otherwise, I'm just kind of the overseer. These two are the real stars, so just clarifying.
Well, that's nice of
Hey,
you, but I
yeah, thanks.
Um, my memories start at some point in the very late 80s or 90s. I actually don't remember what the first movie I rented was, but I remember what the first game I ever rented was. I got a Sega Genesis as my first game console in, I believe, 92 or so, possibly 93, but I suspect 92 for one reason. The first game I ever rented was Wardner for the Sega Genesis, and I just
Ooh,
remember being so
that's
baffled
a
by
good one.
that. Yes, but I just couldn't figure it out. And something about the murky graphics really just kind of made my skin crawl as a kid. I was used to Sonic and maybe Strider. I think we had a copy of Sonic, Strider, Altered Beast, And, well, Altered Beast we eventually sold, I guess, for a similar reason. The murky graphics and evil sound effects, really bothered me for some reason.
Evil.
Yeah, the Genesis was full of those grainy buzzsaws, wasn't it? No, 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 I'm just
Well,
kidding.
the port for Warner to the Sega Genesis is really good. It's not quite arcade perfect, but um,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't appreciate it at the time. But it plays very smoothly. It looks really good. I don't think I was ever able to get past the first world in that game, or the first level, or even past the second half of the first level. I kept getting stuck on this area with like little turrets that would shoot at you.
I remember it being pretty tough. For those not familiar, Wardner is a action platform game by Toplin, who's mostly known for their shoot 'em ups, like well, Zero Wing's probably the medic one, you know. So this one's a little bit outside of what's generally expected from them, and the game is more or less kind of like their take on ghouls and ghosts. Not quite as polished, but uh, basically, you die in one hit, which actually makes it a little harder than Ghouls and Ghosts. And I think that because you get at least take two hits in that one.
You
So,
you can get a cape in Wardner, or it's a needle and thread or something. I think you can get up to 3 hits or something like that. You get a
oh,
cape, or you get a needle and thread, which repairs the cape. I forget exactly how it works, but I didn't get far enough to see that. If I did, I barely remember. Um, as for my first rental store memory, I seem to recall going to a Blockbuster in Tucson, Arizona, and I don't remember what was on the racks. I remember it was kind of late at night because the parking lot looked really spooky, and adding to that spookiness was I think they had a cutout for Child's Play, or it might have been Chucky or something, which would date it to about 89 or 90. Now, that could be apocryphal. It could have just been a movie poster rather than a cutout, but I just distinctly remember that and being kind of creeped out, because, well, I was maybe like 3 or 4 at the time.
Yeah,
yeah.
the whole blockbuster thing. Yeah,
Hmm.
in the '80s, there was no such thing. It's like you had no blockbuster, no Hollywood Video, none of that. It was all mom and pop stores.
So when did Blockbuster first appear then? And that memory could have been even later than that, or could have actually just been a mom and pop store now that I think about it.
Well, they may have actually started off that way. I know that I didn't encounter my first blockbuster until after I've been living in Florida for a few years.
Okay.
That would have
There
been
was
mid '90s.
Okay.
there was a Blockbuster like about 20 25 minutes from where I was, but it was not in the direction that we usually went for all of our general shopping needs. No, the store that we went to back in the day was Hollywood Video, which I don't know compared to Blockbuster how much of a direct competitor they were.
Pretty direct as
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah.
We didn't have a Hollywood Video in town. We had, little mom and pop stores until about maybe the mid to late 90s. But the two big ones were Blockbuster and a place or a chain called Hastings, which I think only
Hmm.
exists in like it was the Midwest and Southwest. I grew up in Arizona, and we went to Hastings because not only was it closer to the house, but they're also a bookstore, or they were a bookstore, so you could go there, buy like a book to read or something like that. And then on the other half of the store were just these massive aisles full of videos and video games and other kind of things like that. Um, Blockbuster was actually, I think, in like the opposite direction to that, or way way further down, and their movie selection was never great from what I recall. And I think they were slightly more draconian with how they handled rentals and other things, or how you had to have a card, or there was something going on with that.
Bleh, some skullduggery and some such.
Yeah,
Uh,
I worked for Blockbuster for a month or two in the early aughts, so I remember that.
Ooch.
hmm. I don't mean to side rail with what barely I remember about Hollywood Video, but I do remember distinctly that on one of the walls, the, I guess, left side wall adjacent to the sales counter, there was a large, I guess, what would you say, a movie poster that was effectively painted across the wall, a giant image that they had of a movie from the 90s. Would anyone care to guess what it was? Hint, it was a superhero film.
Was it The Rocketeer?
No, later than that.
Was it
Okay.
something Batman related?
Yes.
Okay, so that would either be Batman Returns or Batman and Robin. Or no, Batman
You're
Forever.
missing one.
Yes,
Yeah,
Batman.
yeah. It was Batman Forever, yes.
Wow.
Speaking of movie posters and whatnot, during the time I worked at that Blockbuster, I remember I was on shift one night and this elderly gentleman came in, comes up to the counter and he's like, I want to rent that new Tom Clancy movie that you're advertising. And I'm just like, what new Tom Clancy movie? You got a poster for it right there in a window. I look and it's for a Rainbow Six game.
Oh.
Oh.
I had to explain to the guy it was not a movie, it was a game. He was not happy and he took off really quick after that.
Ooh.
What were there?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I was going to say. I was going to ask if there are any films based on Tom Clancy, but like there was those Harrison Ford ones, right?
Yeah, plus Hunt for Red October.
Right.
There was also
Alec
Some of All
Baldwin.
Fears as well. I think there were a few others too.
And one with
Yeah.
one with Ben Affleck.
Yeah, exactly. But just going back to the 80s there, I know when we were speaking earlier, Snarboo, you were wondering about video game rentals at the time.
Yes, I was actually genuinely curious about something. For whatever reason, rental culture with video games, it's not something touched on by too many retro enthusiasts, other than talking about places I think like Funko Land. I can't remember if they rented games. I believe they might have, or renting a bad game. But something I have never heard or seen discussed is rentals for systems like the Atari 2600 or the ColecoVision or Intellivision. And I'm curious what that scene would have looked like had it existed, or if it existed. I meant, I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you personally, I never encountered a video store that rented Atari games or any of those other consoles. But
Interesting.
I know they did exist because I have talked to people who did rent 2600 games for a time.
Okay. Now, would they have? Okay, they wouldn't have rented out a console either if they don't have games to go with it. That only makes too much sense. So it was something
Yeah.
that was up to the store then to decide, rather than a universal thing.
Exactly. And with them being mom and pop stores, they could pretty much, rent or whatever. For example, the store, after my family moved to Florida in 1989, there was a video store in the town I lived in. It was called Video Plus. And they had a huge selection of movies. And they also had, their primary video game rental was NES. So, yeah, they had a huge wall full of stuff. They were always getting the newest stuff. And when the Genesis came out, they started branching out. In the end, by the time they closed down, they were not only renting NES and Genesis, but also Super NES, PlayStation, and N64 and TurboGrafx 16, believe it or not.
When did they add
Whoa.
the Turbo Graphics to that lineup? Because it sounds like they didn't have it at the start, and they didn't have it right when they started renting Genesis games out.
Yeah, I think it actually they started adding those between the Genesis and the Super NES.
Interesting.
And I can tell you two things about that. One, that was the only place I ever saw the rented TurboGrafx games.
Oh yeah.
And two, there was actually a few they were offering for rent that, like an idiot, I never rented.
Now,
Do you
which
remember
games were
what
Among,
those?
those
Oh,
were?
we asked the
oh
same
yes, I do.
question.
Hmm.
One was Samurai Ghost.
Oh, the sequel to
The
Deadly
other,
Tone.
yes, and the other was Soldier Blade.
Oh,
Oh, the best shoot 'em up on the freaking console.
Yes, and I completely passed them up.
Alas.
Oh, it
uh,
gets even better though, because in the late '90s they were getting ready to close down because Blockbuster had moved in and basically taken over everything,
Oh.
and so they're liquidating, just cleaning out their stock. So for about a month, every week I get paid because I was working at a local grocery store at the time. I'd go in there and they would have these games boxed, complete, everything for $5-10. I did buy a copy of Shockman they had,
Mm.
but I basically passed up on everything else for TurboGrafx.
Including Soldier Blade.
Yes.
the one that got away.
Uh, I did end up getting a complete copy of the Tengen Tetris, and
Oh.
yeah, I turned around and brought that down to a store at the local flea market and traded in for like $80 worth of store credit.
Wow.
Go on how much I paid for it at the video store?
How much?
How much?
$6.
Wow. How much does
So
Tengen
that,
Tetris go for
and
now, though?
it's not the rarest NES game anymore, but it can still fetch a decent price.
You
But I tell
know,
you though, six,
if we're Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was at $6, and I turned around and got 80 in store credit. I walked out of that video game place at the flea market with like a box full of games.
Nice. I didn't realize that we could just talk about the stores themselves, if not specifically the games, because my memory's really crappy. But if we're talking about mom and pop stores, then there was one that was only like about a 5-minute drive away when I was a kid called Corner Video. And that is actually where my brother and I got the bulk of our NES collection because they were selling off some NES games I guess they didn't think were as viable for rental anymore. So a good chunk of what we got was from there. Like I think like Castlevania 2 and Double Dragon 2, some good stuff. And some not so good stuff like Dudes with Attitude.
Yeah. That's one thing video stores did carry, was a lot of unlicensed stuff.
That's a good point. Yeah, that was probably where you mostly saw them, as it were.
Yeah, I remember seeing stuff like F-15 City War, and heck was that other game they had? I think it was not by Comerica, but it was
Color
another
Dreams?
one of those Pyramids, I think it was, or something like that.
Huh. Weird. I am willing to bet that is where we got our copy of Master Chu and the Drunkard Who.
That wouldn't. I remember actually seeing that up there too, at Video Plus.
You wonder why I grew up the way I did, huh?
Yeah. Well, I never rented it. I
Good.
remember just looking at the box, going, "This looks bad."
Oh.
You had a good innate sense of judgment. Well, okay, you passed in Soldier Blade, so I guess it was as hit and miss as any of us, but
Oh, I'll give you a better one actually.
sure.
When I was in Connecticut, let's see. Now the video store, the one that rented the CD places out, and this other store that I went to, I couldn't even remember their names at this point. They've basically been lost to the sands of time. But the second one that opened up in the opposite direction from the first store was the first place I ever remember seeing them carrying NES games. And well, we didn't have one yet. So I would just kind of look over them, and at the time I was still going through my whole Atari fanboy thing. But still, wouldn't stop me from looking. Same thing when I went to Toys R Us. And I know one thing that caught me by surprise, I didn't do a double take, is they had a game called The Goonies 2.
Oh.
And it's like, there's a Goonies 2 movie? There has to be. That's why there's a game, right? Oh, no. But Here's the thing. Shortly before we left Connecticut to move to Florida, we come down to Florida to look for a house. And while we were here, uh, because I actually am in Florida now, different place from where I'd moved to, but what had happened was is that my parents had surprised my younger brother and I with our own NES. So when we got back up north, we had a month or so before we were going to move. So of course we wanted to go rent some games. I distinctly remember renting just that first time out. There was Legendary Wings, uh, Goonies 2, because I had to check that out, and I think Skate or Die.
Oh wow.
Cool.
Now, here's the thing though. When I was looking through the games trying to figure out what to rent, I saw a game there, and its sequel. And anyone out there who's read Memoirs of a Virtual Caveman knows where this is going. Because I saw these games, and I thought the cover art looked cool. I picked them up, flipped them over, looked at the back, like, these look pretty stupid, actually. I put them back. So, get down to Florida, get set up, and every so often my parents would go ahead and buy my brother and I each a NES game for our growing library. And one day they're going out. I was staying at home for whatever reason, and my dad tells me, go ahead and write down the name of some couple of games you're looking for. So I write down 1942, 1943. I saw them both, thought they looked cool. And then I wrote the names of these two games down. No idea why I did it. Because the last time I remember seeing them, I thought they looked stupid. Well, my dad comes home a couple hours later, and he hands me a game. And sure enough, it's one of those games that I thought looked dumb. So I put it under a stack of books and forgot about it for a couple hours while my younger brother was playing The Adventures of Lolo.
You better save the receipt.
Yeah.
Sorry, another Homestar reference. I'll try and jam those in where I can, even if no one knows what the hell I'm talking about.
Well, at least it wasn't by you, Billy. My brother had gotten that previously.
Oh god.
But anyway, a couple hours pass. I pick up the stack of books. And, oh, yeah, I got a game today. Huh? So I said, hey, Ryan, you mind if I go ahead and try this out? He's like, I'm getting really far in this. All right, fine. Well, my sister had gotten her own Nintendo, and she wasn't using it at the time, so I asked her to borrow hers. So I popped this game in and started playing it. And by the time I'd finished the first stage or so, I was kicking myself because this game was great.
And what is the name of that game?
Castlevania.
Oh, wow.
And of course, the sequel they had there was Simon's Quest.
Nice.
Which is a damn good game, and screw anyone who thinks otherwise.
Here, here. So, needless to say, I had that. It became my favorite game now. Funny, my Brian and I had this agreement that now that we had an NES, I was going to collect the Super Mario Brothers games, and he was going to collect the Legend of Zelda games. Well, that got thrown out the window. Because after that, it's like, no, I'm going full Castlevania here. And he's like, oh, I love this Mega Man 2 game I played. I got to go and get these. So that's how that worked out.
Well, my first and second favorite series of video games ever.
Hey.
Unfortunately,
And
my
of course,
taste...
we started discovering a lot of stuff too.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
We just discovered a lot of other stuff too.
Well,
So,
unfortunately, my taste wasn't that impeccable. I don't know if anybody here has watched any of my prior rental rodeo videos. Some of them are uploaded to YouTube. I'm kicking myself for not catching up on my backlog. But in any case, most of the games I stream are really mediocre titles. So give me just a minute. I should have turned that off. But anyway, most of the titles I rented were really mediocre, and those are mostly what I stream. But I do have a memory about kind of the opposite of Dyer's. Notably, I was in a grocery store rental area. It might have actually been a separate mom and pop store just connected to the grocery store. I can't remember, but the setup was you'd go into the grocery store and then go down some steps into this rental area. Well, I had my Genesis at this point, and I was looking through the games, and I saw this really colorful cover for a game called Blaster Master 2, and I was just wondering what the heck this was. It looked so colorful. And I turned it around, looked at the back of the box, and I noticed something immediately that caught me off guard. There were no screenshots, and that's usually was my first, that was my first way of judging, whether I wanted to rent a game or not. Was, does the back of the box look cool?
Snarboo, not to interrupt, but could you mute me for a second?
Yes,
I would
actually,
like
give me
to
just a moment.
apologize.
Let me get it to the call here, but I'll keep going anyway. How do I actually do that? Oh yeah, there we go. Mute you for a second. Anyway, well, I passed that one up. I put it back because it's like, well, this is colorful and looks nice, but I don't think this is for me. And then I immediately went over and I found this little game called Lightning Force, aka Thunder Force 4, and I remember taking that game home and just being blown away by it. Absolutely just blown away completely by that game. And ever since that point, any chance I got, I would rent it if I could find it. And I actually, at one point, when I was visiting family in Virginia, my dad actually packed the Sega Genesis up and brought it with us. And I was looking for games to rent, and I only remember renting two. Going to a little video shop, and one of those games was Street Smart by SNK, or it was a port. I don't know if it was SNK. And then there was, yet again, Thunder Force 4, and I remember renting that again and almost beating it then. Like, I got up to, I believe, the 8th stage, the one with the really cool music, but I just couldn't beat the boss. The boss actually scared me a lot because it was this giant worm thing. Very cool. At some point, I think I rented it one last time, and I figured out the 99 Lives code. I found a magazine, and it just happened to have a code for the code for the 99 lives, and then I managed to blast through that game numerous times. And I think every time I rented it since that point, I would just do that. I'd just stack on the lives and just go through it in a morning, either before school or before the Saturday morning cartoons started. And that's probably my best rental memory in terms of renting a good game instead of a bad one, because otherwise it was stuff like Slaughter Sport. I could definitely discuss that, but I have streamed that game at some point, and well, I'll upload the video eventually for posterity's sake. I also see we have our first person commenting with emoji in the chat. Hello, EC Myers, or Eck Myers. I assume it's EC, but yeah. Welcome to the live cast. I think Dyer stepped out. Let me actually see if he messaged me and said I can unmute him real quick. Actually, let me type in the call real quick and let him know that. Yeah, message me when you get back. Dyer. Oh, right as I was doing that, he gets back. All right, let me unmute you, sir. There you go. You should be able to talk now.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, EC Myers. I actually follow his NES alphanumeric streams, which he does every Wednesday on YouTube. Stand-up guy. Glad to see you here.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
Oh yeah, those can be very entertaining streams. I can tell you that. But you mentioned Blaster Master 2 before I had to step out for a second.
Yeah.
Hey, Scroll Boss is here too.
I see that. Welcome, Scroll Boss.
That would be the man otherwise known as Primop. He did the cover of Memoirs of a Virtual Caveman.
That is a great emoji right there.
There's BL85 Gamer. I was waiting for him to show up.
Well, we got the bouncing boobies there, so that's always a good sign. Welcome, BL85. Yep.
So, what I was saying about Blaster Master 2, did you ever end up renting that? Because I missed that part.
No, that was one of the first games I ever emulated. If I saw a game in a rental store that I never rented and I was curious about, or a game I just got nostalgic for, right as soon as emulation started really taking off in the late 90s, I would just emulate it. That was one of the first games I remember emulating, and I thought it was okay. The graphic style it looks nice, but it just didn't play well. But it made me. It ended up getting me to play the first Blaster Master, which is fantastic.
Yeah, here's the thing about that. I had actually rented Blaster Master numerous times after I moved to Florida from Video Plus, and I thought it was really good. And when Blaster Master 2 came out, I was like, well, the first one's good. This one's probably going to be just good. I mean, it's by Sunsoft. I'm buying this. That was a mistake. That was a big mistake. I'm lucky I was able to get my money back.
Now, was that the first and last time you bought before renting, or?
No, there was one other case I can think of. One of the things that sold me on the PlayStation was knowing that there was going to be a Castlevania game for it. Another was knowing there was going to be a Contra game for it. I ended up buying the import Symphony of the Night first. But when I got my own PlayStation, I wanted to go ahead and get a game with it, so I ended up buying Legacy of War.
Ooch.
Hadn't played it. At that point, I was just like, nope. But going back to rentals originally, I'd mentioned that my parents would occasionally buy us a game for the NES. Well, I wish Video Plus had gotten this one in, and I had seen it so I could rent it before, but they hadn't. So we're in Toys R Us, and I'm looking for stuff like Life Force or Simon's Quest, which they were completely out of. And then I happen to see this one, and I'm like, oh, that's based on one of my favorite movies of all time. This is going to have to be great. Keep in mind, this does predate the other two. Yeah, I bought Back to the Future.
Oh. That is like sub-Atari 2600 quality, that game. And I don't know how they managed that on an NES, but they did.
Thank you, Beam Software.
Yep, those guys who were terrible until they made an adventure game called Nightshade that was somehow not terrible.
And then they never made another game ever again. Or wait, did they?
They made Shadowrun the SNES and the True Lies video game, which was surprisingly all right.
Okay, so that was the turnaround point then. Well, that's good then.
Yeah. Then I believe they changed their name to Chrome Studios Melbourne, and then they folded not too long after. I don't remember exactly how that panned out, but...
Well, I'll say two things about my Back to the Future experience. Is that one, it kind of like made me look at licensed games a little more closely from that point. And yeah, most of the licensed games I played for the Atari, they weren't bad for what they were. But then again, look what you're dealing with. And this time though, that was like the tipping point. So when Back to the Future 2 and 3 was announced, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna rent this one first. Glad I did. It's even worse.
Yes.
Yes, with all the puzzle items you have to find. It's like a Sierra Adventure game, but even more inscrutable.
Yeah. But talking about the video stores themselves, Video Plus, they were the main store. There was a couple others in the surrounding areas I'd visited from time to time, but Video Plus was pretty much right down the street from me. They started off in one of the local plazas, and they moved into their own building. It was even closer to where I lived, where they stayed till they finally closed down. And that was when they were really able to expand their inventory. So they went and added a few things, like a dedicated horror section. They had a dedicated cartoon section where I actually found videotapes of shows I watched as a kid, like Voltron and Tranzor Z, which, of course, I immediately rent those because of nostalgia. Get at home watching them, I'm like, I like this? I guess. These aren't doing anything for me. And then, of course, they had a lot of extra space in the back. So next to their video game section, at one point, they actually put in a mini arcade.
Wow.
And they had good games in there, too. I get this. They had Thunderblade. They had Bad Dudes. They had 720. They had Afterburner, I think. RoboCop. I would go down there just to play RoboCop. And a couple pinball machines, too. And they'd rotate a few of them out every so often. But the other thing they had that they got when they started the new building was a back room.
Yes.
One of those back rooms. Which I believe you said you wanted to know a little bit about.
Yes.
Like that.
Okay, so my experiences with the red curtain or beaded curtain room is that they were just mere rumors. I had never been to a rental store, or have never been to a rental store with an adult video section. It might have just been the town I was in, or we just didn't go to that video store. But I always heard rumors about it, about how some stores had this place you could go back to, and they'd have these movies you could only rent if you were 18 plus. but I never have been in
Yeah.
one.
That's right, listeners. We're talking about porn now.
It was inevitable.
Uh, yes. I can tell you the video stores in Connecticut, I never paid attention to anything other than like the games and the big movies that were out. So I'm sure some of them had those back rooms, but I never saw any, you know,
Dyer, are you still there?
red beads or anything like that
Oh, okay.
for movies and such. Yeah.
You cut out for
I
just
cut
a
out all
second,
of a sudden?
sorry. Yeah, you did, sorry. Oh no, are you cutting out Dyer right when we're going to get to the juicy parts?
Oh.
Isn't that how it always goes?
Yeah, it is.
Our call field's trying to censor us for some reason. I don't know how that works.
Well, I'll tell you this. As a kid, I don't recall ever seeing any of that kind of stuff. After we moved to Florida, that was a different story. But there were no red beads. Nothing like that. No curtains. They were just like swinging wooden doors, like from a Western saloon.
What?
Yeah. A few of them were basically floor to ceiling, but the other ones were shorter. So, you know, if you were clever, you could, you know, peek around if you weren't of age yet. And Video Plus had a nice big back room because I know because when I turned 18, I had to go check it out. The interesting thing about Video Plus is that they also offered, well, they had their own membership cards, but thing is, one of the perks was you could rent a free movie every month. So, got to the point where my friends actually went off and got this apartment in mid '93, and which has been described in memoirs as the apartment. And one of the things we do, because a couple of us had memberships there, we go and rent a couple of these movies, take them back to the apartment, throw them in the VCR, and we go all Mystery Science Theater on them.
Cool.
We would just sit there. I mean, if that stuff could have been recorded, some of it was downright hilarious.
Well,
But the story that relates to that once, actually, about a year or so before Video Plus closed down. And of course, at this point, the apartment was long gone. I see we have a Bindi24 in the chat.
yes, welcome, BD24.
Yes. I know exactly who that is. I could out them right now if I wanted to. So I will. Everyone say hi to Betty.
Hey, Betty.
Oh. Yeah, what up?
Yes, she's decided to go ahead and jump in because she's actually in the same room as me and can hear my side of everything, but not everything else.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't blame her
So-
then.
Well, she's heard this story before. Well, this is maybe, 97 or so. And I decided to go check out the back room because you never know. There was some actual funny stuff they had back there. A lot of these porno parodies were just a riot. But anyway, I'm just browsing through the videos. And, people would come and go. Door opens. And someone I knew walked in. I will not name any names or anything like that, but it was someone that I'd known for a good portion of my life. And we just kind of stopped, looked at each other. Hi. Hi. And I'm like,
I wonder who it was.
she wants me to say who it was.
You don't have to name names if you want. That's fine.
Let's
could
just
just-
say it's a good thing. They'll never hear this. At least I hope they won't. It was a relative. I'll say that much.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. And it was like, hi. And then it was like, yeah, I gotta go. And I took off.
Oh, that's always a good time. Always.
Now, speaking of stuff like that, though, I mentioned I had another story. This is a good one. Uh, about, sometime around 94 or so, the town I lived in, their very first porno store opened up. And you could rent videos there. And of course, they had all the stuff that anyone could want in there for intimate activities. Well, when they opened up, I decided to go check the place out, just to see what it was like. So, walked in, got carded, checked it out for a bit, took off. Well, a friend of mine comes back from the Navy on leave at that point. So, me and him and another one of our friends were out driving around. And he sees this place. And he's like, "Oh, I can't believe they opened that up here. Let's go check it out." I'm like, "Yeah, I was in here once recently. It's pretty loaded with all sorts of stuff." All right. So we go inside. My Navy friend goes in first. Guy cards him, waves him through. My next friend goes in, cards him, waves him through. He sees me. "Oh, hey, I know you. Go ahead and go on it." I'd been there once before that. At that point, my friends both turned and looked at me, and one of them's like, "Only been here one time, huh?" I swear to God, that dude just got a good memory. Yeah, last I heard, they were actually still open. So, which proves that I guess that the town I lived in likes its porn, even in this modern age.
Well, some
But
people have refused to go digital, so
yeah, that's true. But yeah, well, enough of that then.
okay.
Did you have any other questions about the red beaded rooms there, sort of?
No,
Snarboo?
that's those are the best stories you could probably possibly tell without it getting too profane. But you did mention something about having a membership card and how that gave you certain benefits. Now,
Yes.
how did that differ between stores? Because I seem to remember Blockbuster, you had to have the card, but it was really weird, and I don't think you got very many benefits with it.
I think if you like rented X amount of movies in 1 year, you'd get a freebie. That was basically it. Video Plus had a much better deal. Like you got a free movie once a month. Didn't matter what movie it was, and as long as you had it and used it during that month, you were good.
So you could hold on to it the
But
whole month?
Blockbuster, oh yeah, and it's like you could hypothetically you could rent your free movie the day the last month was ending, and then go back the next day on the first of the new month and rent a free movie.
So yeah, man. So you could get two free rentals back to back essentially if you did it late enough in the month.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah, but no, Blockbuster, they were very corporate, very, you know, business. You were a number. At least the people at Video Plus, the regulars, they got to know by name.
Yes, that's a story as old as time, and now Blockbuster is no longer with us.
That's what they get for being evil. I will say this, though. Blockbuster did have its uses. I remember, well, of course, they opened up one in the town next to where I lived. So, and since I was out of high school, hanging out with my friends one night, we'd go there quite a bit just to check the place out. Plus, they had a couple things that Video Plus didn't have, like anime. And I remember going in there a couple times, and they'd have videos for sale, like brand new ones, and found a couple of pretty good ones that way. It was, in fact, I distinctly remember actually going there, and I was working, doing about 60 hours a week at the time, so I was making pretty good money for 1993. And I remember going in there with my friends and looking at their videos, and they had right next to each other a copy of that Beyond the Mind's Eye computer generated animation thing. And I saw that. You remember that?
I had at least one of those. Might have been Beyond.
I
forget if that
didn't
was
actually
the
learn
original.
about them. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good.
I was just gonna say I never learned about those until recently, and I was like, man, this just takes me back, despite never watching this. And I like how some of the bits from the Lawnmower Man, of all things, made it into that collection.
And that was in Beyond the Mind's Eye.
Yes.
A film that's
I actually,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say I actually tracked it down on DVD.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I wonder how many of those. I know that series ran for a while.
Yeah, there
Um,
was the Mind's Eye Beyond, like three or four of them at least.
I think they're on archive.org now for anyone that's curious about them that hasn't seen them in any case.
oh
Yeah,
shoot.
that wouldn't surprise me.
Well, all I can say is that Snarb and I watched The Lawnmower Man semi-recent-ish, and it's actually not a bad film. At least we found it very eminently enjoyable somehow.
It is a fascinating movie. It kind of gets your hooks into it, and even though it's not actually at all like the similarly titled Stephen King story, that kind of pissed Stephen King off, but it has elements from that story. It's still really just it's compelling if really weird. That's one of those movies that I actually kind of found out about from my sister. Actually, my sister loved horror. I was never a big horror fan, and I wouldn't usually watch the movie she would rent, but I'd hear her talking about it or something, and that's something about rentals that's really interesting is that different family members would rent different things, and you would somehow learn about these things offhand, or you would learn about them either through other ways, or sometimes you might even watch a movie that they rented. And that's one I didn't rent, but I remember her renting it and just talking about how messed up that movie, and it always made me so curious until I was able to watch it. I think finally, like, the Sci-Fi Channel showed it at some point, and they might have censored it a little bit, and I was like, yeah, this is pretty cool. Eventually, I played the video game, slightly less cool. Although I should note, I actually owned the Genesis port. I actually got that relatively recently, pretty cheap, complete. And I don't know, both the movie and the game are a guilty pleasure. So it's kind of interesting how stuff like that can impact you. Just casually learning about your other family members' viewing habits.
What about the video-only sequel?
I have yet to see that. Actually, that was in theaters.
Me?
Oh, my
I think
bad.
Lawnmower Man 2 was in theaters actually.
Wow.
Actually, you might be right about that. I distinctly remember seeing a commercial for it.
My God. It couldn't have done very well.
I don't
No,
believe it did.
a friend of mine watched it and he said it was garbage, so I never saw it.
Oof. Oh well.
Well, I know that in the mid '90s, I was doing a lot of renting, and Lawnmower Man was one of the movies I rented.
I think.
And
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, actually, a funny story about renting stuff was the apartment kind of dissolved in late '93 because, well, one friend decided to join the Navy, another friend decided to move back home, and my name wasn't on the lease, so I just went back home too. And one thing I remember is when Jurassic Park was released on VHS. And of course, Video Plus got it in, and it's like, oh, we've got to watch this movie. I'd seen it in theaters, so I'm telling my parents and my brother about this. It's like, we've got to watch this. It's such a great movie. And oh yeah, that other movie they got this here too. It's called The Nightmare Before Christmas. And I had seen it in theaters. It was not what I was good movie, but not what I was expecting. I was not expecting a musical. I remember distinctly renting both of them, brought them home, and of course I'm hyping up Jurassic Park the whole way, and play the movie, and of course my dad's like, yeah, it was good. My mom's like, eh. I was like, that was great. I mean, why you let's just watch the other one. So now here's something I didn't take into account, and I really should have. My mother was very much a big Disney fan, loved musicals, and her favorite holidays are Halloween and Christmas.
Oh.
And she hadn't heard of this movie before then. So we watch it, and as soon as it was over and we, hit the tape to rewind it, she just looks at my dad and goes, "Well, we go out tomorrow, we're getting this." To my knowledge, my sister actually still has that VHS copy of it.
Nice.
So, but yeah, that was. Of course, I'm sitting there going, but Jurassic Park was so good.
On the subject of Jurassic Park, there were always those movies it seemed like everybody had rented. I didn't see Jurassic Park in theaters. I think my parents thought it was a little too scary for us at the time, but by the time it had rolled around on VHS, they're like, yeah, we can do that. We can swing that. So we, naturally we watched it, and yeah, I was blown away at the time. I'm trying to remember other movies we rented. You'd sometimes rent something that was really hyped up, and you'd see it in the store and be like, "Yeah, I can finally watch that." I missed it in theaters because well, couldn't make it to the theater, or they didn't. That local theater didn't have it because a lot of theaters were like rental stores. They were mom and pop places, and sometimes they would get in really weird stuff or just one or two big things. But I'm trying to remember a movie that was really overhyped that we rented that was a huge disappointment. Actually, usually I would actually still be entertained, but I know a movie that my dad absolutely hated after he rented it. Sphere, which I believe was by Michael Crichton. I think that was another one of those.
Yeah.
Also rans after Jurassic Park. He hated that movie so much. That memory is stuck in my head, especially just how much he hated the ending.
Well, considering it was the early 90s, I'm going to say I had a lot of disposable income from my first job, and I'd saved up a lot of money. So I was going to theaters quite a bit too. But so Tenga, you had something to say?
A joining question. I haven't seen either, but was Sphere worse than Congo?
No, it was much better. That was another movie we rented because, again, Michael
Oh.
Crichton, the guy who made Jurassic Park. And I watched Congo and I was like, why are they shooting lasers at gorillas or whatever was going on with that movie? It was a mess. I'm like, this, even as like, I was probably like, what, 8, 9, 10, maybe 11 at the time. Even at the time, I was real baffled by that movie. It's like, I don't get this.
I never actually saw Congo.
Uh, um, don't
Sounds
know
like
if you
you,
should just
didn't
watch it or not.
miss
I
out
kind
on
of want to
watching.
just see the part with Bruce Campbell in it.
Yeah. Huge Bruce Campbell fan is our Dyer over here, and I will say he is always eminently entertaining in anything he's in, even if it's pure bullplop.
Yes, this is true.
I didn't even remember him being in that movie. Of course, I didn't know who he was much later. As soon as I found out about, I think I saw bits of Army of Darkness on TV. Like me and my dad rented Evil Dead 1 and Evil Dead 2. Evil Dead 1 was a bit of an awkward one, given there's a very unfortunate scene in that one. But we both loved Evil Dead 2. That's just such a great film. I still okay. That does remind me though. I did eventually rent Army of Darkness on DVD. It was much later. I think we couldn't find a tape copy of it or something, but finally got it on DVD. It was the one with the ending where he slept too long, and I was so pissed because the other ending is so much better.
Oh yeah, the director's cut.
Yeah.
Yeah, I prefer the happy ending personally.
That one's just great. Yeah, lady, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave the store.
Yep. And I know that became the basis for image on Dyer's message board, the third moon. Lady, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the board, which I always like when that was used. So.
But speaking of Evil Dead, that was another series I slept on for a while. I remember seeing the ads for Army of Darkness when it came out, but I never saw it, kind of forgot about it. And then around 2000 or so, when I got into my first place of my own, one of my friends was telling me about the video game came out for the PlayStation. He's like, I gotta go pick this up. Evil Dead is great. And I'm like, I've heard of this over the years. I remember seeing Evil Dead 2 in Video Plus, but what's it all about? He's like, it's crazy, it's awesome. You need to watch these. So after he ended up going back home, I said to myself, well, I got a couple days off. So decided to go out and see if I could find any of them for rent. Found the whole trilogy. So I picked those up from the video store in the area. I got myself a large pizza from somewhere. Went home and just binged Evil Dead for a day or two.
Not a bad
I've
way to
been
spend a
sold on it ever
weekend.
since. Yeah. Well, the only time I can think I did something like that was that one time I watched all 6 Star Wars movies back to back.
Ooh. Now that's a bit harder to do, plus, the prequels.
Well, you guys are wusses because I viewed every Star Wars movie before The Rise of Skywalker, and I'm not sure if it paid off.
But when I did this, there were only 6 movies.
Yeah, and now there's 11 and a couple of TV series, and there's going to be more.
I'm waiting for
Or
the
maybe
holiday
more
special
worse.
too. Disney's gonna dust that off and just Be like, yep, you
Wait.
remember the holiday special? We can't
Wait,
re-release it.
wait. No, if I didn't see it yet, but I think they did actually make another holiday special.
Oh, they
They
made
did the
two.
Lego Star Wars holiday special. It's actually really good.
Oh,
Oh.
Well, okay. I trust Lego to actually do that properly.
Yeah, I gotta get on it at some point.
Although it's
But-
funny you mentioned the holiday special though, because if you go on Disney Plus, they have the Star Wars Vintage channel, and they actually took the animated sequence from the holiday special and put it on there.
Yeah, the
The
droids
one
bit.
with Han Solo's fantastically distorted chin.
And squishy R2D2.
The very first appearance of Boba Fett, no less.
He's got this kind of like normal voice.
Wow.
I'm a friend. I am Boba Fett.
Oh, times.
What an inauspicious start for Boba Fett, and then he fell into a giant mouth.
Yep. And then he got his own TV series, but that's neither here nor there.
If I may interject, I am envious that you guys actually remember renting movies back then, because I hate to admit it, while I did see the occasional movie as a kid, I didn't have the attention span for a lot of them, so they were just kind of sporadic here and there, and I don't think I actually rented anything. Now, for me, it was all about the games when I was able to, because those were able to hold my attention somehow.
I've actually got a couple, not to interrupt you. So
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I've got a couple of good stories about movie rentals back in the mid 80s and, what happened as a result.
Sure.
All right. Well, one was when it took forever for Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom to make it home video. It was like over a year after the theatrical release before it finally came out.
Huh, what was the holdup?
I don't know to this day, but
Damn.
I remember renting it and just watching the hell out of it. It was another one of those, kind of like what I'd done with Raiders. And well, after that, in 84 and 85, Ghostbusters and Back to the Future came out respectively. And I missed them both in theaters. Begged my parents to rent these. And we watched them all together originally. My mom was aghast at all the profanity in both movies. It's actually very mild.
Nowadays,
By today's
yes.
standards, I'm sure, yeah.
This was my mother we were talking about, though. My parents had rented 1941 once.
That's starring John Belushi, right?
Yes. I think he plays Captain Wild Bill Kelso. But here's the thing about that. My father told me this. The opening scene of the movie is a parody of the opening of Jaws. Even using the same actress that got eaten by Bruce.
Cool.
So she's up there and she strips down and she's part of the Polar Bear Club. So here she is swimming around in this freezing cold water, and all of a sudden you hear the Jaws music start playing and something goes by her. And next thing you know, a submarine comes out under her and she's hanging off the periscope. And when the subsurface is full, the crew comes out along with their Nazi observer, played by Christopher Lee.
Wow.
And they're basically like, yes, the attack on Pearl Harbor was successful. Now we're going to go ahead and launch our attack on Hollywood. And as they're starting to go back into the sub and it's starting to go down, the last sailor looks up as he's going down. And what does he see? Naked woman hanging from the periscope. He gets all excited, starts pointing up and going, Hollywood, Hollywood! And meanwhile, water started to go into the open sub. And so he just, gets back in there, screws the hatch shut, and she swims away. Now, here's what happened when they rented that. Keep in mind, you can't see it. It's a Spielberg movie. But as soon as my mother saw, this obscured naked woman on the periscope, she turns to my father and goes, turn it off. Just turn it off. Yeah, she wasn't about that. Even the hint of it, Dad didn't even get to see the movie until years later.
I guess I was like that a little bit in my household in a way. One of those very, I guess in retrospect, backward mentalities where violence was all right, but sexual content was a little bit less savory for a little kid to absorb. I
Exactly.
don't
That
know why it was like that in
that
retrospect.
was uh, that was kind of how it was in my household. My dad was a little bit more lax. Like if it was just a girl's butt, and he was like, "Well, it's just a butt. Everybody's got those. It's whatever." Because I remember him looking at Boris Vallejo pictures on our computer at one point. Going through a disc his friend had given him, and I assume it was mostly
Dang.
fantasy art like that. With the naked chicks. And he told me to close my eyes while I think I had nowhere else to be. It was just me and him, and he wanted to keep an eye on me because I was a very hyperactive child. So he's like, okay, just close your eyes every so often, and like that's the only one I can remember being able to see. It's like, oh, it's just a butt. It's whatever.
Well, that also extended to the profanity too. Like I said, my mom was big on Disney and like old musicals from the 50s and whatnot. Uh, but she let them slide because she knew how much we liked the movies. And well, we got our own copy of both of them, except we didn't get them. We kind of made them. That's a different story entirely. But that aside, we had a tape that had both Back to the Future and the Disney movie Bedknobs and Broomsticks on. And for like a solid week, my brother and I would watch both of those movies every day after school. And my mom got sick of hearing them to the point where she actually confiscated the tape and wouldn't let us watch it for like a month. Tired of hearing Christopher Lloyd yelling Great Scott and Angela Lansbury singing about the beautiful briny sea.
I didn't know
But
Lloyd was in that.
but Bedknobs and Broomsticks or Back to the Future?
Well, Bedknobs and Broomsticks. I mean, I knew about him because of Back to the Future.
He's not in Bedknobs and Broomsticks. They were just on the same tape.
Oh,
Yes.
oh. Well, I'm stupid.
Well, okay, so you bring up making your own home copies. That's actually another memory I have from 80s rentals. My dad, when he was stationed in Germany, or he might have gotten it slightly before and just brought it with him, I can't remember. Well, he had this little box, it was this little wood grained box, and it basically looked like what a Walkman, cassette Walkman would have looked like if it could hold a VHS tape. Well, the way it worked, based on how I remember him using it, was you would have your VCR hooked up, and then you'd take like the TV out or the AV out, excuse me, from the VCR, and you plug it in there, and then you'd put in a blank tape in this little VHS Walkman. You'd hit record, and then you'd hit play on the VCR, and well, that's how we came across a lot of our movies. A lot of special editions. So, I everybody I knew did that. Everybody I knew had like that copy of a movie that they rented and copied, or got from a friend of a friend. It was kind of interesting how that intertwined with the culture so casually.
Yeah, of course. For us, it was a matter of waiting for the price on VCRs to come down.
Right, you
Because we
told me
kept,
about that.
yeah, we kept our CED player until the price dropped to affordable, and my parents bought our first VCR. Must have been sometime in '83, and it was one of those top loading models, and it also had a wired remote controller on it.
That just blows my mind. That blew my mind when you told me that's like the remote was wired.
Yes. And we knew we had to anything we rented we had to return rewound, but we didn't know you could just stop the tape and hit rewind and it would do it automatically. I remember the first couple times we rented a movie, I just sat there and held the rewind button until it got back to the beginning.
Oh my gosh.
In fact, I still remember one of the very first movies we ever rented. It was an Australian kids movie that was part live action, part animation called Dot and the Bunny.
I think I've seen that one. I think I know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, the part that sticks with me is where they talk about an Aboriginal legend called the Bunyip. It's some kind of ghost bird gorilla thing or whatever that eats people or something. I forget exactly what. But anyway, once VCRs became a little more affordable, we bought a second one. And that became the source of about half our movie collection because the other source was my aunt who had cable. and she would go ahead and just record movies on HBO or Cinemax or whatever. I remember because one day she tells me she got a surprise for me. I'm like, oh, okay, I like surprises. And she hands me a VHS tape that has the entire original Star Wars trilogy on it.
Wow.
Yeah, that was something. In fact, just thinking about my aunt, she's responsible for my love of Indiana Jones. Tell you what happened. She would host these yearly Christmas parties. And one year, must have been, I don't know, 82, 83. Apparently, I didn't look like I was having fun. And she's like, you feeling okay? You having fun? And I'm like, oh, I'm all right. She's like, well, would you like to watch a movie? Okay. Okay, I got one for you. Sets me down, gives me a glass of hot chocolate, plate of Christmas cookies, and puts in a tape. She's like, I think you'll like this one. It's Raiders. And of course, I'm hooked right from the get-go. Thing is, though, is that little by little, all the other party guests drift over to watch the movie.
Oh.
And as she put it to me years later, she's like, you brought my party to a halt that night. And I was like, I wasn't the one who put the movie in, that was you. Well, she passed away a few years ago, but yeah, I have her to thank for that. And as a result, that was... See, I'd seen The Empire Strikes Back when it came out in theaters. My older brother had taken me to see it. And according to my parents, I just talked about nothing but Star Wars for the next 5 years. That's not accurate. Because after I saw Raiders, I talked about Star Wars and Indiana Jones for the next 5 years. In fact, we were on vacation one year, and we'd gone to a store there, and they had VHS cassettes for sale. One of them had just come out. It was Raiders. And the price was like $20, which, because early VHS prices were incredibly stupid. I remember seeing, when Star Trek II Wrath of Khan came out, it was like $100 for a tape.
And that was in what, 80s dollars?
83, I think.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was not unusual, though, yeah.
So Raiders being, $20. So I basically begged my parents, like, oh, they got Indiana Jones. I really want this movie. Please, 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 please. Yeah, they bought it for me. I still have it. It's definitely very well worn. But it does have that blurb on the bottom, same as my CD, where it says, coming to a theater near you, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
That does remind me, though, you mentioned the price. I don't know what it was about the VHS and that kind of stuff at the time, but it seems like they really wanted to discourage any kind of home movie kind of thing, or it kind of had an element of elitism to it, because it'd take months, sometimes up to a year, as you noted, for stuff to come out on tape. And then usually you might only see it at a rental store. Only a rental store could probably afford some of those copies, because $100 for Wrath of Khan in 1980s dollars, that's asking a bit much of your audience. Not to mention VCR players probably cost like $400, $500, $600 at the time. I mean, I can't imagine charging that much for a single-use consumer electronic nowadays.
Yeah, I know. That's where they started. I have seen some ads from about the time we got our VCR where they've been chopped down to about $200. I think it's where my parents finally sprung for it.
Right, that makes sense.
And then, of course, we got our second one, and which brings me to the other story I was thinking of. In 1986, as you guys may or may not be aware of, Transformers was at one of its peaks. Because that was the year Transformers, the movie, came out. And I wanted so badly to go see that in theaters, but we were on vacation at the time, and by the time we got back to Connecticut, it was gone. So at this point, I started counting the days till the VHS release. And I think it was finally released like early next year. And of course, begged my parents to pick it up from the video store, as soon as they had it available. And of course, they keep telling me, oh, no, they didn't have it. And one day I come home and it's like, did they have Transformers movie yet? No. But we did rent a movie. Oh? And they pull it out, and I'm looking at the handwritten label on this generic tape. Transformers the movie. I was thrilled. So we made a copy of it. And I swear every day for at least 2 weeks, I'd get home from school. I was in junior high at that point. So I was kind of getting to the point where I was starting to get out of like collecting toys. It was beginning anyway. But I was still very interested in the Transformers TV series going on at the time. And G.I. Joe for that matter. But I'd get home from school and I'd have about an hour before everyone else got home from school. Transformers the movie is only about 90 minutes long. So I would get home, drop off my stuff, pop our tape in. Every day for about 2 weeks.
Nice.
You have a very similar memory to me of the Transformers the movie. Now I was this was well past when it hit theaters because I was like, I don't even know if I was born when that movie hit. It might have been this. It might have been my birth month. I'm not entirely sure, but a friend.
August '86.
Yeah. That came out literally my birth month then. So that's pretty good timing there. But I digress. A friend of ours, I think, had a VHS collection, and I think their kids had maybe outgrown Transformers, so they actually gave us a copy of it, or maybe they had it and we made a special edition of it. But I just remember wearing that tape out too, just watching it as much as I could, crying when Optimus died, the usual, and that's probably what cemented my love of Transformers, because I kind of grew up at the tail end of the toy line. Like the first Transformer figure I can remember owning was oh gosh, what is the name of the commander of the Seacons? Was it Snaptrap or something like that? That's the first one I can remember owning.
Name completely escapes me right now.
Right, I can't quite remember either. I know, but yeah, it was like the commander of the Seacons, the really big one, and I just loved that thing because it was a giant robotic turtle that turned into a guy with a sword. I didn't learn years later that he actually combined with a bunch of smaller figures, and that kind of blew my mind. But to this day, I still have not finished off a classic set of the Seacons. I don't even think I still own the original figure I had anymore. I have no clue what happened to it. But yeah,
Well, I gotta say,
Hey guys, I hate to order Muppet, but I would like to ask, when are we going to allow the audience participation bit?
That's a good question. I actually need to step out for just a moment, and I will be right back. If you guys want me to open up the floodgates, I can. If you want to answer questions from the audience, this might be a good time to do it. Unless you have more stories you want to share with us, Dyer, that's also fine.
well, let's see. I got a few more, but I think we can start doing questions now. I know that at least one person out there is just dying to ask questions, right, Bruno?
All right, so let me turn off emotes only, and I will let you guys do your questions and answers here. So yeah, that should be, it's in slow mode, so you don't overwhelm the chat. So I trust you guys, but I will be right back.
All right. Well, whoever wants to go first, fire away. Anybody? Anybody?
There may be a delay on Twitch.
Bueller.
I'm wondering if there's I'm wondering if there's any sort of clown shoes story that I can try and think of in the meantime to bridge the gap. But
Clown shoes.
yeah, I am basically the BLA5. This is the point where you get to ask questions, preferably if Dyer and Snarboo, because I really don't have much more to contribute.
Yeah, all right, BL85 Gamer. What are we doing now? You're lost? We're reminiscing about this stuff. What are you doing?
Alone on a Sunday night?
Yeah. Could be worse. All right. It's Saturday night. I have no date, a 2-liter bottle of Shasta, and my All Rush mixtape. Let's rock. Let's see. Oh, in the meantime, Sotenga.
Yes.
Let me see. I was gonna see if. Haha. Oh, the non-blockbuster store is Prime. That's a good question. I actually have a couple. There's shortly before, actually, right around the same time Blockbuster opened up in my area, there was also another store, literally just down the street, that opened up called 16,000 Movies. And honestly, judging by their inventory, they weren't very far off. And that was, they also had a back room, but they also carried NES, Super NES, and they were one of the first places I remember they carried the N64 as well. That's where a couple of my N64 owning friends used to run them from. And they also sold games there too. In fact, the very first copy of Ghosts and Goblins for the NES I ever owned, I picked up there. And it was also the first place I'd seen Indiana Jones' Greatest Adventures for the Super NES for rent, which I think I bought the day later. Not from them. There was a video game store in the area called the Video Game Warehouse that had actually gotten it for me. But let's see, 16,000, ironically, they were completely bought out by Blockbuster, and they became another Blockbuster. And the two of them were about 5 minutes apart. And I think they're just like a lawn care store now. At least the last time I was down there. But as far as regional chains, let's see. Blockbuster was the biggest one in the area. Oh. Now, see, BL85 brings up a good question. Game you always wanted to rent, but it was never available. I honestly can't think of any time that ever happened.
I can think of one actually, and I'm back by the way. I'll try to also answer your question, Squirrel Boss, as well. I see you asked a question. But yes, to answer your question, BL85, I believe it was Contra Hardcores, the rental store we normally went to, just did not have it. But Blockbuster did, but we didn't go there very often, so I was able to rent it at least once, but I never saw it again. There were actually a lot of late gen Sega Genesis games that just you couldn't see them or you couldn't find them at rental stores for whatever reason. Ristar was like that. I did end up buying a bargain bin copy of that one, so that worked out. There was a game called Tinhead I always wanted to play. That one was also very hard to emulate for a while because just no one had dumped it. It must have been a rare release. And there was at least one other game I can think of that I always wanted to rent. But I couldn't. I know I would sometimes go into other game aisles and was generally curious about those games. Like, I saw like that there was another Thunder Force game, but it was only on the SNES. And I'm like, man, I wonder what the deal with that is. I remember seeing Phalanx for the SNES and wondering what that was about with the banjo player.
We were all wondering about that, I think.
And wonder we will forever.
But yeah,
that question was actually answered.
Yeah, that is actually answered. That is true. All right, Scroll Boss. More stories about non-Blockbuster store. My town didn't really have a lot of specific chains or mom and pop places, outside of like grocery stores having a section. But I can tell you the weirdest place I ever rented a game was actually from a gas station. And that one, that was actually the first and only time I have seen Rolling Thunder 3 in person. That was the game they had. I remember seeing the guy getting attacked by the robot dogs. So definitely picked that up, had a blast with it, and I have never seen that game physically since, and I'm not sure I ever will. I think the prices for that one are pretty high, even for a cart copy, I believe.
I see that Unicat has popped in to ask a question. And just to state for the record, this is my sister.
Hey, Unicat.
So, Unicat, please call me Dyer, even though everyone here knows who I am. But regarding the player you mentioned that we watched Coyote's Lament on, I remember Coyote's Lament, but I don't remember that player. Unless you're talking about the CED player. I don't know if that's the case or not. So, some of my memories from the time, you're older than me, so they're not quite as fuzzy for you.
Now that's an interesting point there, Squirrel Boss.
Yeah,
that
Donkey Kong Country, I know you guys are a big fan of.
I actually do like the game. I actually do like it, having actually gotten around to playing it. But yeah, that was one that just dominated the like. Eventually, the Hastings, the rental store we would always go to. At some point, they basically kind of were just the place. Their kiosks, they had like game kiosks where you could try out games, and it was always just Donkey Kong Country and Mortal Kombat 3, which was the hot thing at the time. Although I did get to play the SNES Power Rangers game at one point on that kiosk, and that was a game that's one of those games I was envious of that wasn't on the Sega Genesis, because we got this really bad fighting game instead, and I'm still mad about that. I can't think of Genesis games that really dominated like that. And my Hastings was actually pretty good about having a mix of things. Like that's how I first played Gunstar Heroes. What was that other one? McDonald's Treasure Land Adventure, and a few other interesting little titles. I mean, I'm sure they had like a lot of copies of Sonic. They also had a copy of Splatterhouse 3 at some point, and I was always wanting to rent that, but I was just so spooked by the cover, and I'm still kicking myself for that one.
Yeah, my Splatterhouse 3 story is quite a bit different, actually. One of the game stores I rent to also rented out games. And when I found out he was getting a couple copies of Splatterhouse 3 in, it just happened to come at a time where I burned through my savings from my job. So I didn't really have any money at the time, but I knew I had to get that game because how much I love Splatterhouse. So I decided to take the one thing I was willing to part with at the time, because I didn't really play it, and trade it in. What I ended up trading was my Game Gear and the entire collection of games I had for it. Yeah, that doesn't sound like the best deal, a whole library of games for one Genesis game, but I do not regret it one bit.
Yeah, you got to make those tough choices with collecting sometimes. Now, what games did you end up trading in that you had on the Game Boy exactly? Like, if you can just remember a few offhand.
Well, let's see. I had Shakan the Forever Man. I had the Terminator. I had, I think, Sonic the Hedgehog, Columns, and I know the only one I was really sad about losing was Vampire Master of Darkness.
Oh, yes, the Castlevania clone.
Which I'm so glad came out in Europe as a Master System game, because once I got on eBay in the early aughts, I looked it up, it was there, I bought it. So.
Does it run too
fast?
fast
I could finally have.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I can finally have Master of Darkness again.
Does that run too fast on American Master System, or do you have a European one or something?
No, it actually runs just fine. It's one of the games that's optimized for both regions, I guess. The only one I can think of that actually runs fast is Power Strike 2, and I don't have an actual copy of that.
Yeah, that one's probably pretty expensive.
Yeah, but as far as other games, like ones that you like, BL85 had asked, I have two distinct memories of, well, one was when Mario 3 came out, because everyone and their brother wanted that. Well, it helps when you know the owners of the store. I had a copy put aside for me and actually continued to check it out for almost a solid week. But by the time that week was done, I was like, I'm not that crazy about this game. I don't even think I'm going to rent it again. Because originally I was like, I got to buy this. And then it was like, yeah, I'm going to pass. I'm one of those weirdos that doesn't like Mario 3 as far as when it came out.
Well, World is the superior game, so you're well within your rights.
That's a funny way of saying Super Mario Brothers 2. And I mean the good American version.
Okay, yeah, Super Mario Brothers 2 is the best one on the NES, certainly.
Mario 2 and Mario World are my favorites out of the entire series, followed by the first one.
I get the feeling we lost BL85's respect at this point.
I think we did. But I'll say this other one too. Video Plus had also gotten in Super C when that came out.
Oh.
Exactly 2 copies. And I saw it up there, only one of them was still checked in. So I was like, well, I know what I'm getting. And it's like, now, several of you, if you've read memoirs, have heard me mention my friend Bromley.
Just had an internet hiccup. Sorry about that. Very sorry, in fact, because you were just about to mention something, an interesting story, Dyer.
Yeah. Looks like it's back up on my end.
Okay, good.
Well, what it turned out is that Bromley had rented the other copy of Super C.
That sort
So the
of
two of us had to,
what is it they call that, synchronicity, I believe.
yes, and we had the only two copies of Super C in town. All right,
Man.
and let's see. My sister had another question. Okay, memories here. Okay, yes. Romancing the Stone was something else that my mother had objected to. Specifically, that scene where Kathleen Turner and Michael Douglas are rolling down the hill, and he lands face first in her crotch. Yeah, mom's like,
dear.
turn it off.
Mm.
Yeah, so he didn't get to see that for a while too. I ended up watching that in film class when I was in college.
Interesting.
Yeah, actually, we had quite a diverse selection of movies that when I was in film school. So I think we watched Cabaret, we watched Romancing the Stone, we watched Temple of Doom, we watched Star Trek 4, and a episode of Miami Vice that my instructor was in as a minor character.
Wow.
Cool.
He's just like, yeah, we're gonna watch an episode of Miami Vice today. It's like, okay. So
Hey,
we're just
Scroll Hey, Scroll Boss. I've been here in the background. I'm just not as good a storyteller as these guys, so yeah, I'm just kind of chilling.
well, as Betty likes to say, I'm a born storyteller. So
You are much better than I am.
yes. Speaking of Betty, uh, she actually did work at a video store during the time,
Wow.
back in the early '90s. So if she wants to go ahead and add more about that time, please feel free.
Yeah, the chat can be seen here on the screen, and we can read it out or discuss it or whatever. But yeah, that's something I would definitely have claimed, or even now. Okay, I actually have a question for you, Betty. But did they ever let you take copies of the movies home? Because I'm curious if that was something it did, or if they just sold them.
I hear her typing, so
Okay, yeah, it's in slow mode. I can actually let me set that lower that down to have it on a pretty high thing.
Oh,
Oh, that's a bummer.
I can tell you when I was working at Blockbuster, we were able to go ahead and check out movies. It's like we'd be able to do it before they were officially put on the shelf. So
Well,
it's like
that's kind of a nice
I was
perk.
working. Yeah, I was working there when I think the two Matrix sequels came out on, or at least one of them came out on video. And yeah, regardless of how those movies are, but I was able to check the copy out and watch it before anyone else could. So that was nice.
At least you didn't
Movie
see it in
wasn't that
theaters.
I never saw a single Matrix movie in the theaters.
me neither. Somehow.
Yeah, I think that's another one of those ubiquitous, everybody rented it kind of movies. Like everybody at my grade level had seen The Matrix. I don't think anyone saw it in theaters.
I saw that one at home as well. I could have maybe seen The Matrix Resurrections in theaters recently, but I just didn't.
The Doors movie. Okay. That one I have an interesting story about that is also related to rental. So, my sister, at one point in her life, just had a huge crush on Val Kilmer, and that was one of the movies she rented. And that was also one of those movies that I could stay in the room for certain scenes, but then they're like, okay, you got to close your eyes now. You got to put your hands over your eyes, because I seem to remember there were some salacious bits in that movie.
Yeah. Are we still talking about the Matrix here, BL85?
Yeah, I believe he is.
I know some people really god darn hated Resurrections, but I don't know. I get the feeling it's not really. It can't be that much worse than Revolutions, I'm sure. Because Revolutions sucked. I'm sorry.
Funny thing about the Matrix, I saw the first Matrix movie. I actually still like that one. There's just some bits in it that I still think are kind of cool and atmospheric and whatever. For some reason, based on the way they were hyping up the sequels, something about that's one of the very first cross media franchises I think they were going for. Besides Star Wars, I know Star Wars had a bunch of cross promotional, cross media kind of stuff going on that tied together. They were just really hyping it. This was probably maybe the first instance of maybe a cinematic universe, whatever you want to call it. But just as like, okay, so there's a video game, a comic, an animated, what do you call it? An animated collection of shorts. There's a specific term for it, but I'm drawing a blank. And all these other things, and you have to watch these in order to understand what the heck is going on. It's like, that can't be a good movie. I was so elated when I was proven right. That is one of those moments where I'm like, finally, I get something right for once.
Oh, the Animatrix.
Well, the Animatrix was actually pretty good, but I was talking about all of those tie-ins they had. They had the Enter the Matrix game. I think they had a book or a comic book. They had the Animatrix. They had, and then the movie itself. And if you really wanted to dive deep and understand all of that rich lore, you had to consume all of this. And I was like, maybe I was just a contrarian teenager, but I was like, this can't be good. There is no way. You don't do this unless you don't have faith in your franchise.
The only one of those movies I actually really remember any details about to speak of was the first one.
Yeah.
The first is the best, and it will never change. Although, if I wanted to be a hipster, I'd say that the best movie that the Wachowskis ever did was Speed Racer. But
I still need to see that one.
I don't want to overhype it because I know some people aren't totally on the up and up with it, but I thought it was fun.
But thinking back to more rental type of stuff.
I mean, I guess I could at least say one game that I remember specifically renting, because, just to contribute something, because I feel like I've been quiet for a good chunk of this.
Go ahead.
Mystical Ninja starring Goemon, because I'd grown up playing Legend of the Mystical Ninja on the SNES, not realizing that it was part of a larger series, and then I see this game and Nintendo Power, like, oh hey, Mystical Ninja. They made a comeback? I haven't heard this in a while, not knowing that, of course, the series had gone on much longer in Japan, and they were only getting back to it just now. So, I picked it up on rental. I really enjoyed the heck out of it. Very Zelda-like in its presentation, but being even wackier and very, of course, Japanesque in all of its design, as the Goemon series always is. Really enjoyed it. Even beat it back then, while I had it rented. Did not pick it up to own back in the day until years later. I mean, I got it eventually.
Hopefully
I got
at a good price.
Decently, yeah. It wasn't before the giant BS bubble went to
the speculative market. Did you know that a copy of Arrow the Acrobat 2 for the Sega Genesis goes for $600? It has to be a great game. Although I think that's only complete. I think that's people trying to probably sell it for that kind of copy. Like there's actually a site called, I think, VG Charts or PriceCharting.com, where you can actually see what the actual sell prices for some stuff is. And half the time it's not usually that high, but you just think about where the market is now, and it's just, that game isn't worth it. It's an okay game, but it's not worth it.
I mean, what gets me about that sort of stuff is that I can't at least understand, much as I hate it, but a game selling triple digits, maybe even 4 digits, God forbid, and probably even more, if it's a good game, if it's a genuine classic and or quote-unquote hidden gem, I can definitely understand that. So why is it that genuine bullplop is also highly priced the way it is?
Well, in the case of Arrow the Acrobat 2, it's just a late gen release. I don't even remember... I didn't even know there was an Arrow the Acrobat 2 until emulation happened, because that would have been right around when the PlayStation and Saturn, well, really just the PlayStation and N64 were taking off. And, if it's a late-gen Genesis release, especially one that's like that in a bigger series, it's probably going to fetch a high price. Even more if it's for the Super Nintendo.
Well, I don't want to get too much on that tangent, because BLA5 just asks, what was a game or movie that you rented and immediately said, all right, I need to own this?
It's kind of funny, because I was just thinking of one.
Go for it.
Well, Snarboo's got one to go first. Go ahead.
Yeah, I
Okay.
actually have. That's actually how I got most of my Genesis collection. You know, all of the good games. Okay, so Lightning Force, aka Thunder Force 4, whichever you prefer, whichever one is the true one to you. That was one I immediately knew I had to get. That one I actually got kind of late. Probably for a good price, complete no less. This would have been late 90s when no one cared about the Genesis, but that's another story. Gunstar Heroes, that was another one I picked up. What was it? Contra Hardcores eventually. I did get that one too. There was a couple of others too, but yeah, a good chunk of the games I rented I ended up owning. There's also a few that I rented all the time that I would rent like 4 or 5 times and never owned, but that's another question, and I think Dyer has an answer for this one as well.
Which question is that?
The one that BL85 just asked about
Oh, yes,
games.
I do.
Yeah.
Give me just 1 second. Okay, this didn't actually happen at a rental store, but that video game place that I traded in my Game Gear, since I also rented out games. I remember going down there, and it was Friday, and I'd seen they just got a couple new games in. One of the ones they got in was Flashback for the Genesis.
Oh wow.
And I was like, oh, I remember seeing this in magazines. It looked pretty cool. So I went and I picked it up, brought it home, started playing it. It's like, this is great. This is like out of this world, but better.
Much.
And when I finally took it back after 3 days, I talked to the guy who owned the place. And it's like, you got any copies of this for sale? Because I want to pick this up now. It's like, no, I just had the rental copy there. And it's like, oh, well. So I tell you what, you're the only one that rented it. I'll sell it to you and just take the price of the rental off it. It's like, so I'm basically getting a new game then. Sold.
You know, I wonder how many games ended up being like that. We would have to get someone who knew a little bit more behind the scenes, but there had to be so many games that either only one person ever rented or nobody rented.
Yeah, it's like, there was, I can tell you one thing. I actually got my copy of Lightning Force from Video Plus when they were closing. I swear the game had never been touched. It was in that good a shape.
Wow.
And it still is, because I still have it.
All right, so Scrollboss mentioned some stuff relating to pricing here. Scrollboss says, as someone who is still an action figure fan, the only logic needed is the ability to get away with the price, sadly. Yes, I guess now is the time to bring this up. I'm a huge action figure fan. I've been collecting Transformers again for the past 5 years. You know, got back in on it on Titan's Return because I always like the Headmasters or their designs, and that's something that they hadn't brought back for a while. Well, they just announced they're doing another price hike, and at this point, you know, the most basic figure you can get, the deluxe class as they are known, is going to be $30. And at this point, I've been priced out of collecting. So, fortunately, that hasn't happened with retro gaming yet, because, you know, I can justify that a little bit more given what you get from a game. But yeah, I just can't swing that. So I understand that from that level. And Scrollboss also says, the game that convinced me the fastest was Ogre Battle, a game that I never saw in a store. Only got it later as payment for an art commission. Wow. That's an interesting story.
If it's an RPG or RPG adjacent, it's bound to be very pricey. I guess because, like, you know, length equals content. But Ogre Battle is a genuinely great game from what I understand. One that I need to get into more.
JRPGs were hard to find at the time. I don't remember seeing very many of those for rent outside of Exile for the Sega Genesis, but I never saw any of the other big ones. There was Warsong though, actually, but that's more of a strategy game. But I never saw like any of the Phantasy Stars or wait, no, I did see 3. I never saw 2 or 4, but 3 was one they always rented. And Phantasy Star 3 amuses me because the character that the guy is fighting on the cover is actually a figure from the New Adventures of He-Man toy line. If you look, it's identical.
Wow.
It's one of the Skeletors. I think it was the last Skeletor they released. Okay.
You got me thinking, actually, about action figures and such. And I've got a tiny little collection right now, mostly like reaction stuff and some Star Wars stuff.
Yeah.
But I still kind of regret what happened to my childhood action figures. Like, I had a nice big Star Wars collection in the mid 80s. I gave them all to my brother. And then I had stuff, Mask and He-Man and whatnot. That all just got destroyed. And the ones I had left by the time I started getting out of the stuff was G.I. Joe and Transformers. I sold my entire collection of G.I. Joe figures in 1990 just so I could buy a copy of Valis 3 for the Genesis.
That is a tough trade, and I can't say I necessarily blame you for that. Even if those Joe figures would net you a tidy profit.
Yeah, and then what happened to my Transformers? And I see we have Bathroom of the Future here.
Yes, welcome, Bathroom of the Future.
Hey, dude, how's it going?
Yep.
Yeah, rhetorical question.
The Prince of Brains. Yeah, speaking of that particular question, those were games I actually got a chance to see in action because I know people who owned them.
The
So,
Fantasy
in fact,
Star
my
games?
first real introduction.
The Fantasy Star games?
Oh, yeah, the Fantasy Star.
Sorry.
Games. In fact, I met a good friend of mine because of the original Fantasy Star. And it's like we were talking video games. He had a Master System. And he kept going on about this Fantasy Star game. And I was like, I got to check this. He's like, I'm getting a copy. So, yeah, you got to come over to a place to check it out. To date, that's one of the only JRPGs I've ever played. But 2 and 3, I know Bromley owned 2. I think my brother had 2, 3, and 4. He also had Ogre Battle. He was the RPG guy. I was the action guy.
Yeah, it's usually like that. My sister, she would play Genesis games with me a lot. She would play on the system too, and she was the fighting game person in that family. Like, she was so good at those, she could just wallop the floor with me, whereas I was more of the run and gun and the platformer kind of guy. Eventually, I got back into fighting games, but I just remember how mad I would get at Mortal Kombat.
Well, the MK series is kind of imbalanced anyway, so that's...
I did learn an Infinite with Rain in Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 for the Genesis. You just keep doing his lightning strike move over and over again. They can never escape.
Yeah, Rain was hyper busted. He was pretty great. And the Prince...
Yeah, just to bring up one last thing about my old action figure collection. And this is the part where, Bathroom of the Future is probably going to rip me a new one. In the mid 90s, what happened first was that my Ryan, he had a copy of Revenge of Shinobi, which he didn't like. And I loved the game. So he offered to trade it to me for some of my old Transformers because he was starting to get back into collecting them. Needless to say, we did it. It's the last remaining game. He passed away back in 2019, so that's the only game I have left from his collection. But the rest of the ones I had, I took down to local collectible stores and places in the area and just sold them off for petty cash. Looking back on it, it's very sad. I had a complete Galvatron from 1986.
Wow.
And I probably got $5 for it.
Ooch.
Ooch indeed.
Yeah. The only one I kept was my...
No, go ahead. I was just going to say Ooch is Snarboo's combination of oof and ouch.
That's basically what it was.
Yeah.
But the only one I kept was my original Hot Rod, up until those who've read memoirs had heard me mention the Great Crash. And I ended up giving him to the guy who bought the majority of my collection.
Wow.
To date, I have one Transformer, and it's one that only came out a couple of years ago.
Hmm?
Yeah, I actually bought the Transformers Back to the Future crossover figure.
Nice.
Nice.
That is actually a good one. It definitely captures the feel of the vehicle really well.
Hey,
Oh, yeah.
I have a bit of a dumb question when it comes to collecting anything, be it games or films or action figures or whatnot. a bit of a two-parter, actually. One, is it safe to assume that sometimes you just get things because they're available, not necessarily available and at a reasonable price, not necessarily that you really want them, but they're just there?
Yes, that's how I came. That's how I
Yeah.
got a lot of my Steam collection. It's interesting how cheap Steam games kind of replaced rentals for me, and how I haven't even really touched a lot of those games.
Well,
And that, I was gonna
go
say,
ahead.
that kind of thing happened to me when I was really getting into the whole import thing in the early part of the last decade. There's a website I was going to. They were doing like, buy 3 games get one free, and be like, okay, well, I want this, and I don't know. How's that look cool? I'll get that. And sometimes they were just total busts.
Well, I have a joint question rolling off of that. Are there any notable examples you can think of something that was, or at least looked, so bad that you wouldn't even touch it, even if it was like $5 or whatever?
Now, are you talking about a game that, or like anything really at all, like
Yeah,
something?
yeah, yeah. Not necessarily a game, an action figure, what have you. Just whatever collectibles are of such.
Oh, okay,
low
so now we're
quality
talking
that you-
about bad collectibles. Well, that's something
I
so
know
bad
that-
I would never buy it. Well, most modern Call of Duty games.
which I streamed one recently as an April Fool's prank, and it really sucked horribly
Yes,
for everyone
yes,
involved.
I am still pouring out one for that one.
Press F in the whatever, wherever the meme goes. I don't know.
Actually,
Well,
I
I can
can.
tell you,
Sorry, go ahead, Doug.
I'm just saying, I've become super selective as I've gotten older. So,
Yeah, that's understandable.
Um, Actually, to answer your earlier question, is there anything that you bought even though you didn't really want it? I actually got a great deal on a bunch of complete in box Genesis games. One of them was the Lion King game, which my SO loved. So we got the Genesis version of that. Zoop, which was always a puzzle game I had a soft spot for. It's not a complete copy, but it was a cart copy of Jurassic Park Rampage Edition. Very good game. And finally, a copy of Batman and Forever for the Sega Genesis. It was just, I was like, well, these are at least 3 games that I like. I think I can just shove Batman Forever off into the corner for a little bit and pretend like I don't own it.
Unicat says that they're thinking collecting some Turtles merch. Never a bad option to go for.
Yes,
I feel like I could do that because I mostly only load Turtles from the games, but they're quality games.
The
So.
Super 7 figures are amazing. I can't really afford them, but I have one of Mutagen Man sitting on my shelf in the other room.
Mutagen Man,
It even has
awesome.
the same action feature. You can still put water in him if you really want to. I wouldn't because it's such a high quality figure. The other thing
Wow,
about
that's
Super
awesome.
7's figures, though, they're a little too big for me to own. It said like 7-inch scale. My brain didn't process that as being like almost twice the size of a standard um, TMNT figure, which were about the same size as He-Man figures, and I can't really collect at that scale anymore, and it's a shame because McFarlane Toys is now producing Spawn toys again. I have a couple of those, absolutely amazing, but again, a little bit too big. But in terms of modern figures, actually, that are the right scale, the new Masters of the Universe Origins figures, absolutely amazing. Retain all the great qualities of the original figures, decent price, and you can even swap the parts around and create your own custom figure. It's really cool.
nice.
Yeah.
I know I'm supposed to be the Order Muppet, and I think this is getting away from our rental subjects.
I mean, this is kind of
Yeah.
late. We're kind of just talking to the audience. I think we're going to have to do another rental discussion. Maybe talk about the decline of it because there's some stuff I never got to experience with it, and other things, that I actually, I rented well into like the late 2000s, early 2010s, and I could discuss that as well.
yes.
I wanted to go ahead and add something here. You know how, like you were saying, you had a game you could just kind of maybe just shove to your back of your collection.
Yes.
I've got a few like that.
He's dish.
When it comes to Indiana Jones games,
Uh-oh.
those stay in my Indiana Jones collection. They don't ever usually get, cross paths with my regular video game collection. with 2 exceptions. 3 if I'm in a good mood. The one would be Raiders of the Lost Ark for the Atari. Another would be Indiana Jones' Greatest Adventures, and then there's Young Indiana Jones Chronicles.
Yeah, those latter two are legitimately damn good games. And the Raiders game, I can't say that I'm a fan of it, but it was very ambitious for its time.
It's quirky.
Quite.
The other ones I have, I tried to just look at them on the shelf. I mean, I've got a couple of the Lego indie games too, which I do play from time to time, and Emperor's Tomb for the Xbox and PS2.
Oh man.
But I'm thinking more along the lines of classic stuff. So I've got, Last Crusade for the Master System, which just no, and Temple of Doom for the NES, and the Instruments of Chaos, starring young Indiana Jones for the Genesis.
I rented that one. I still don't know how I feel about it, but I just remember thinking, why does this game run so poorly?
It just does.
That's
the other one I get.
I was going to say, that's the blast processing at work, huh? Looks like Bindy's heading off for now. Thank you so much for stopping in.
Yes, thanks for stopping by, Bindi, Betty, whichever you prefer to be called.
Good night, dear.
And
oh yeah, she's right there.
She just kind of shook her head. But the other one I can think of, which I just shoved to the back of my collection, would be a copy of Strider Returns that was gifted to me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, BL85 knows the whole story about that. But to go back to a couple of the questions and whatnot we had here, I want to address a couple of these. All right. Bathroom of the Future mentioned about Galvatron being in the wrong colors. That always weirded me out, too. I couldn't figure that out. And Prime, I'm sorry you never got to see Galvatron in real life, because weird colors aside, he had this really cool, light up, fusion cannon with sound effects and stuff. It was really neat. And let's see. And Unicat, yes, I kind of figured you were talking about movies and not games. But let's see here.
BL85 has another question. I can wait until you see it, actually.
One. Yeah, greatest movie you found only because you picked it up at a rental store by coincidence. Greatest sequel ever. Get out of here. Yeah, he's been giving me the business about that one for a while, about that Strider Returns.
Oh, yes.
I actually played through that one. Actually, that's on my YouTube channel. I'll have to drop a link in here at the very end. But yes, I actually uploaded that one. And I actually beat it. I actually am pretty decent at the game, at least if you're playing with the classic sword rather than the really crappy sweep. But,
The greatest video game I ever found by accident was Legend of Dragoon.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Betty wanted me to go ahead and mention something.
Okay. I actually just heard her whispering a little bit. If you want to actually...
I didn't quite hear her, so... Yes.
Yeah. She basically, and this is kind of a response to BL85, and it's not about a movie, it's about a game. Said the greatest one she ever found, by complete coincidence, was Legend of Dragoon.
Legend of Dragoon. I don't have a lot of experience with that. I had a friend that was the JRPG guy, and he liked it.
Yes, one.
That's on the PlayStation 1, right?
Yes.
I know that game is very divisive. Like, our bud Clade is a sacrosanct devotee of it, but someone else I remember, I can't remember, just freaking hated it. Or maybe Clade was the one who hated it. I don't remember.
I think Clade's the one that really likes Dragoon.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Movie or game, I guess I'll expand that to games that I only learned were good from a rental. Just coincidentally, I'm trying to think of one. I know there's definite examples of that. I want to say it might have been an animated movie. Actually, yes, I can think of one as a child. Whenever you talk about rentals as a child, sometimes you just rent anything that's really colorful, and sometimes you get good stuff, and sometimes you don't. Well, we picked up this movie called The Last Unicorn, right?
Oh, I know that one.
Yeah,
Mendrick.
yes, we didn't know what the deal with it is. Just hey, unicorns, fantasy, whatever. That is still one of my favorite movies of all time. Just it hits differently depending on your age. It's so good. Um, I've actually been
That
listening to an audiobook version of it with my SO too, and it's just as good as the movie, if not better.
Well, I can tell you that all my kids were girls. So when they got to be, in their mid single digits when they wanted to see a movie, was in Best Buy one night, happened to stumble across the anniversary edition of Last Unicorn.
Nice.
And of course, they saw a unicorn and they just about lost their heads. So picked it up and they loved it.
Excellent.
Also, Unicat mentioned her favorite turtle. The one she's talking about, of course, is Donatello.
Brad. I used to be more of a fan of Michelangelo back in the day, partly because I'm shallow. My name's also Mike, but I've come to like Raphael more nowadays. I find myself getting more angsty in my 30s, and he's always like the real jerk to deal with. But like, I feel like he's the turtle that has the most growth, relatively, because he's always the one who has to learn the lesson and whatnot. And I'm analyzing the turtles as deep character studies right now. How much of a nerd am I?
I mean, we've all done it at one point in our lives. Let's be real here, or well, most people maybe.
I'm sure people have done so about like Coltrane from the Gear series or something like that.
Well, I remember when I was in film school, I actually did a paper about why Captain Janeway was the best Star Trek captain since Picard.
Holy! You liked her more than Cisco, eh?
Keep in mind, Cisco was commander at the time.
Oh, well then that's
So
kind of a weighted paper, isn't it?
Wasn't it, though?
Yeah, a little. Yeah.
That's exactly why I did it.
I still have a soft spot for Voyager. I don't care what anybody says. It
I
had some
do
stupid
too.
episodes, but I really liked it. I don't even hate
find-
Threshold that much, and that's the bad one.
It's not the worst one on there. I mean, it at least has cheese factor going for it. Now, the one tattoo that got into Chakotay's Native American mysticism, which was ill-informed by a bogus expert on the set of Voyager, that one was worse than the Threshold. It was very boring.
I don't think I saw that one, and I guess I was spared there.
Yeah.
I'm a diehard Bride of Chaotica fan.
That one's excellent. That one's so good. My personal favorite, though, Living Witness. Greatest episode in the series. Best Doctor episode. I love the AMH as well as any Voyager fan should.
I can't... Shattered. That's the name of the episode.
Ah, yeah, the one...
Best moment in the series.
The
The
most symbolic moments of the new episodes having a much better direction than the old episodes.
Oh man, favorite. If we're on Voyager, favorite Voyager episode. It's the one where they went to the planet that spun too fast. Forget the name of that one.
That was really good.
Blink, wasn't that one called?
Yes, that was a
That
very
one's
good
excellent.
episode.
Yes.
Blink of an eye.
Blink of an eye.
Blink was the Doctor. Yeah, Blink was the Doctor Who episode with the Weeping Angels.
Oh, now that's a series I need to get on. I know Betty would admonish me for not being much on the Who series, but
Oh no, you wouldn't have to worry about Betty admonishing you.
One of your children.
Daughter would
Right.
admonish you. But let me go ahead and let me address a couple things that came up here. First of all, Bathroom of the Future. Seriously, Last Unicorn traumatized casually fancy?
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, there is the tree boobs. There is that.
That I laughed at that part. I do have an issue with The Last Unicorn. And it's nothing personally against the movie itself, but rather what it overshadowed.
Uh-oh.
You see, right about the same time, two movies were animated movies about fantasy characters were set to be released. Last Unicorn came first. The other one was indefinitely shelved. It took an additional 4 years for it to finally come out. And it happened to be one that I discovered by, guess what? Renting it.
Oh, which?
That would be The Flight of Dragons.
Oh, that's a good one.
That's one I
It
get
is.
to see. I really should get on it.
It
And
was
that
on
actually
Netflix
plays-
for a while.
But that actually plays back into BL85's question because we rented that and I absolutely loved it. And to this day, I've got a digital copy and I've got the DVD that I bought because it's available through the Warner Archives.
Yeah.
But that is just such a great movie. Now, let me see here. And Unicat is still talking about the player that Aunt Ruth gave us, which I do not remember. I mentioned that before, but I honestly don't remember that particular player. But like I said, you're a few years older than me, so you will probably remember it better than I do. Although, on the other hand, I do remember being at one of her Christmas parties, and that was the first time I ever got to be on film because they got themselves a video camera, which was super huge for the mid 80s. Would you like to know what I did?
What?
Remember Back to the Future?
Yes.
When Marty is filming Doc's test run of the DeLorean?
Oh.
And Doc introduces himself. Like, good evening, I'm Dr. Emmett Brown. I'm standing here in the parking lot at Twin Pines Mall. It is October 26, 1985. And it's 1:18 a.m. and it's temporal experiment number 1. Yeah, I actually did that.
Nice.
Oh, wait. Now I know what she's talking about. Unicat, you must have missed one of the first things we talked about. That was the CED player.
Yes,
I
you
thought
did
you were
mention
talking about a
that.
VCR. Yeah, because that's where we got ours from, was actually from my aunt. She gave us our CED player.
Okay.
So, well, that really hooked us up. Yes, you're right. So, when you go back and you can actually listen to the video again, you'll be able to hear when I talked all about that. We'll discuss this later, okay? Anyway. Anyone else have any questions they'd like to ask at the time?
I'm also trying to think of any answers for any of them that I haven't answered yet. I think there was another answer I had for BL85s. I want to say I discovered a lot of anime that way.
Man, all my brain can think about is Star Trek, because I binged on everything that Netflix had back in 2020, the major pandemic year where everyone was sealed in. At least for me, that was the year of Star Trek, so it wasn't a total bust. And wow, I do not like Star Trek Enterprise.
What, you don't like the Hokey Folk song that opens up the show?
Don't sing any of it, Sire. Don't even allude to it. I know how you think. In fact, I'll do it before you. It's been a long road. Blah, blah, blah. Faith in the heart. Blibbity, blibbity, blue. Shut up. God.
And it's funny. I wasn't going to do any of that.
Okay. I brought that on myself.
Yes, you did. I do like the joke they made out of it on Lower Decks, though.
Oh, what was that?
Well, Boimler gets assigned to the USS Titan at the end of the first season, and Riker is late coming onto the bridge.
Oh, yeah. I remember this now.
I was just down in the holodeck watching the adventures of the first Enterprise crew. Man, they took a long road getting from there to here.
Lower Decks is better than it has any right to be, I gotta say. I still have to get in the second season, though.
Yeah, third season's due out later this year.
Shit. Shoot. Oh, jeez, there goes my profanity.
Well, I did say you could do a hard PG-13, or if you wanted to go back all the way to Beetlejuice, you get one F-bomb.
And you know what's funny? I remember watching that movie with my mom when we rented it. I thought for sure she would object to that, but surprisingly, she let it pass.
Wow.
Huh.
Yeah.
I guess
the magic
maybe
of Tim Burton. I guess Nightmare
Exactly.
Before Christmas had won her over.
Well, she also liked Pee-wee's Big Adventure, so maybe
Well, that one's great. Yeah, of course.
So,
By the way, at your suggestion, of course, I caught up on WKRP in Cincinnati. The episode where Arthur had his reunion, Alice Nunn, Large Marge appeared in that one. I was like, oh my god, that's so cool. You remember that?
Oh, I remember that quite well.
Awesome. But I think I cut you off about to say something. I'm just geeking out over here. What up?
Go ahead and geek out again for a moment.
Okay. Yes, Unicat Beetlejuice is a great movie. I actually grew up on the animated series, which of course did
Yes, I
not
did
very
too.
much follow the plot of the film because there are no Maitlands and Lydia and Beetlejuice are actually friends instead of the creepy relationship they had in the film. But, putting that aside, it was a pretty dang good series for what it was. I especially remember liking the episode where they get into an infected video game, because of course I did. I was a total nerd for that.
I don't remember that one. I didn't the Money for Nothing guys, the guys that did the music video, didn't they do the 3D for that show for the segments that used it?
Wow.
They might have.
That was
I
that
honestly
Mainframe
don't
Entertainment?
know.
I can't remember, but yes, that's a great show. I just remember this episode where I think Beetlejuice got a credit card and he ran it up too high, and then like Lydia was reading the APR. It's like, oh, 1% APR. That's not too bad. And then it's like, wait, compounded every 5 seconds, something along those lines. I need to sit down and watch that again.
That'd be a great
a
nostalgia
lot of
trip.
'90s cartoons hold up, especially the ones that aren't too big on the product tie-ins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know if you get the later home releases of Beetlejuice, they actually have 3 of the episodes included as bonuses.
Nice.
Whoa, cool.
So, but
I,
go ahead.
I actually remember the Edgar Allan Poe episode legitimately freaking me out. That was probably, I think that might have been an actual Halloween episode too, so they were darker than usual on it. But
Yeah.
my memory's a little rusty there.
But here's an interesting connection. Television and rentals,
Hmm.
because in the early '90s there was a couple of TV shows that ran which focused on video games, and as such, some of it informed our renting decisions.
Oh, yes, she was a Unicat. I think Alice Nunn's voice appeared. Sorry, cut you off. I just didn't catch next to me. Alice Nunn's voice appeared in a prior episode, but she showed up physically as like one of their classmates who was also the innkeeper they were staying at. And
Yep.
yeah. Sorry, continue.
No, what happened? I distinctly remember the show Video Power
Yeah.
with Johnny Arcade,
Oh dear.
and well, cheesiness of the early '90s aside, a lot of this they did do a lot of previews on there. I remember the first place I ever saw Castlevania 3 being actually in action.
Wow.
Nice.
And for that matter, they did do Splatterhouse on one of those episodes,
Very nice.
which I originally thought I hadn't seen that one, and then thinking back on it, I was like, well, maybe I did. But a lot of times they showcase stuff that you might have seen maybe in a magazine or whatnot, and of course, then a few months later, you go to the video store. Oh, hey, I remember that game from Video Power. I want to check that out. So, and then there were other ones just like, yeah, no. Of course, they also had their own version of Captain N, the Power Team.
Yeah, oh yeah, the one with Max Force from Narc and Tyrone from Arch Rivals and Quirk.
Yep.
And I think
and
Kuros from Wizards and Warriors.
and Bigfoot from Bigfoot.
My brother hated that game so much. Beam Software strikes again.
Yeah. Now, Unicat's also asking if anyone remembers the Wizard.
I have heard of it and I've never seen it, so I guess I have to turn in my Nintendo Geek card.
I admit, not a huge fan of that film.
Wait, I think I did actually eventually see that one because I remember more of it now that you mention it. Yeah, I think I did see that one eventually.
Well, 2 things about that movie I can tell you about, because being there when the movie was announced, that was super huge because obviously first U.S. appearance, Super Mario Brothers 3,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
so that was a huge deal. It was a movie I wanted to go see in the theaters, but didn't, so I rented it and watched it once. It's like, yeah, it was fun. I liked seeing different games and whatnot. And didn't watch it again until it came out on DVD in a 2-pack with Cloak and Dagger, which was another game based, or another movie based on games.
Yes. Danny Coleman.
Yeah, the Atari movie, I believe, that Unicat mentioned.
Let's see here. Okay. Let me go back here. There was a question, I think, or something.
I hate to order Muppet again. I don't want to put a kibosh because I'm having a lot of fun with this, but it's getting close-ish. Oh wait, it's 11:46, not 56. Shoot, sorry.
Well,
continue.
still, yeah, we should probably wrap this up here in just a bit. But I did want to add on to what Dyer was saying about shows that informed your rental choices. That was Nick Arcade for me. That was Nick Arcade for a lot of kids. But that's how I first played El Viento. I think they might have played Ernest Evans as well. That's might be how I figured that one out.
If I'm not mistaken, I read at some point that while El Viento was on there, it was actually never played. Philistines, kids don't know
Somehow
what
I
they
heard
like.
about it, but I remember seeing all those Neo Geo games and wanting to play them so bad. And when emulation eventually took off, I remember loading a Neo Geo emulator up in DOS, and the first thing I think I played was Magician Lord. Love that game. It's not fantastic, but I just love it.
That's a fun one, yeah.
I am totally on board with you there. That was one. Like I said, being a few years older than you guys, I remember the magazines at the time were really hyping up the Neo Geo. And the first place that got it in was our local bowling alley. And they had Magician Lord, Nom 75, and I think Ninja Combat.
Oh, Ninja Combat stinks. I hate to see.
Well, I watched the demos for Nom 75 Ninja Combat, but I wanted to play Magician Lord because I remember seeing that in the magazines.
Right.
So I played the hell out of that and always wanted it to get ported, but obviously it never did.
Yeah, alas. I mean, whenever I am on a losing streak in a game while I'm streaming, I keep saying, again, changes to hell. When I die and make, no progress, and that English line is from Magician Lord, so,
Prime. Yeah, to echo what everyone else is saying, I'd say The Wizard is worth watching at least once.
Yeah, I'll agree to that.
If for nothing else than the Power Glove scene, which I'm sure all of us have seen by now.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to mention about that movie, though, was that it featured Jenny Lewis.
Oh, yes.
And have you ever heard her band?
We're Rilo Kiley, a bit. It's been a while, though.
Yeah, I've watched a few of her videos on YouTube and whatnot, and she actually is pretty good.
Rad.
So.
Yeah, I don't know anyone else in that film went afterward, except something unfortunate with the guy who did the Power Glove line, which I won't get into on here.
I think I've heard about that.
Stuff.
Oh wait, Fred. Oh wow, I'm stupid. I forgot he was in that. God.
Yeah, he was the Whiz Kid, wasn't he?
No, he wasn't. It was actually his brother.
Right.
Them, I don't know what happened to.
He's still doing stuff too, actually.
No crap.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And of course, Christian Slater was in that too.
Wow.
Christian
obviously,
Slater?
I don't remember a lot from The Wizard, so.
I think Bo Bridges, for that matter.
No think. Huh. I'll be damned.
But as far as the rest of the cast, couldn't tell you.
That's fair.
Well, but there was something regarding Christian Slater too. And it's like that movie came out, I think, in '89, and the last thing I remember seeing him in after that was the cameo he did in Star Trek VI.
Right.
He's the one that woke up Sulu.
Yeah, I think I remember that. Been a little bit of a while since I've seen 6, which is definitely a far better movie than I think it usually gets credit for.
Which one
Agreed.
is 6 again?
The Undiscovered Country.
Oh, I like that one. It was kind
It
of
is
like
good,
almost
yeah.
a spy thriller kind of thing going on a little bit.
Yeah, quite influenced by the Cold War, if I'm not mistaken, but...
Yeah, the concept was that the Berlin Wall comes down in space.
Ah, yes. Makes sense.
And that was Star Trek, at least the movies. I watched, when I was a kid and saw a couple episodes of the original series, I was bored by them. I was
That's understandable. Star Trek, I didn't get into as a kid. They're definitely more deliberately slow-paced and cerebral, especially TOS.
Yes, and then when I was in junior high, I started catching reruns of it, and I got into it.
Nice.
And I distinctly remember actually hanging out with a friend of mine, and his parents decided we were all going to go to a movie that night. And they decided we were going to go see Hook.
Oh.
All right. Robin Williams, Steven Spielberg, I can deal with that. But we're standing in line, right? And this place is packed. And I'm looking at the movie posters off to the left. And I happen to see the poster for Star Trek 6, which had just come out. I'm like, hey, why don't we go see Star Trek 6 instead? Nah, we're seeing Hook.
Ooh. I guess that's why you hate that movie nowadays.
Yeah, I don't really hate it. I just have to
Very
see it.
indifferent.
Yeah, exactly.
I like Hook well enough, but I can also understand.
I never saw it, but I do really like the Iron beat 'em up based on it.
Yes, both of the games based off of it are pretty good. Well, I think there was an NES game as well. I can't remember now.
There was an NES game. There was the Super NES one's the one I remember
Right,
most.
Genesis and then Sega CD as well.
Yes, I remember seeing the ads for the Sega CD game. Oh, but let's see. The movies I had to rent, actually. And here's another interesting 80s video store memory for you.
Sure.
I knew a couple guys at the time. They moved to Maine about a year before I moved to Florida. I've never been able to reestablish contact with them. But we were hanging out one day, and one of them's like, "Oh, our mom's got to go somewhere. We got to go with her." So we're going to the video store. They came out with Star Trek 4, which had just come out on VHS.
Nice.
And then, it was a short time after that, I'm hanging out with them at their place. We're playing Atari, and one of the guys, Josh, his name was, he's like, "Yeah, we're going to need to stop playing Atari here in a bit. My parents want to watch TV tonight. There's a brand new show coming on." And I was like, "Oh, what are they watching?" It's that new Star Trek show, Next Generation." I'm like, "Oh, well, that's cool." Yeah, I didn't start watching TNG until sometime in season 3.
Actually, you know what? That's for the best.
Yeah.
Because season 1
Yes,
is not
later.
good.
That's the post Tasha Yar episodes, right?
Well, Tasha died like before the first season was even over.
Oh, right.
Yes.
And then season
Bed, shitting the bed.
It comes
Pretty
back
much.
right as you're saying shitting the bed. That's good.
God.
I'm not cutting that out. I am not cutting that out if it makes it in, or maybe I will. I don't know. So stream died again. Is this an okay stopping point for you guys? Because it's almost midnight. I feel like we could easily do another one of these. Like I want to touch upon, something Unicat brought up about video games based off of movies. That's a whole subject. And in fact, the first game I streamed was Cliffhanger for the Genesis. And well, let me dig up the link to my YouTube. I have a backlog. I think the next game I need to upload is the X-Men game for the Sega Genesis. But yeah,
that game.
You hate that game or like that game? No, you're not a fan.
I am not a fan. Nope.
It's grown on me. It's grown on me a little bit.
The first one is kind of mid, but I do genuinely like Clone Wars. The second.
Oh, Clone Wars is fantastic. That's what the game should have been. But yeah, there actually should be a link to my my YouTube on my Twitch channel. But in case you can't, it's not. In case it's hard to find or whatever, there it is.
Sorry, Dyer. What were you gonna say?
I will say on the subject of licensed games, I remember the very first one I ever played.
Oh.
Superman.
For the Atari version?
Oh, the good one.
I need to play that. You've told me about it, and now I'm curious.
It's funny. So many years later, and that's a Superman game that never really gotten toppled. Just like many years later, and the first Richard Donner Superman film really has never been beaten either. I guess late 70s, early 80s was just Superman's time,
And I'll tell you, Prime will back me up on this one. It is amazing how well they made that work, given the limitations of what they had to work with.
Right.
And it's like they solved the problem of Superman being invincible by making him invincible. He'd just be temporarily depowered.
Nice.
But it was basically, if you were trying to just, complete the game in the shortest amount of time. And there are a couple of tricks to I've completed that game in about 11 seconds.
Wow.
Man, modern video game makers are cowards. They should just make Superman freaking invincible, not Like, there was only one game that did that, one based on Superman Returns, that actually had the city of Metropolis as Superman's life bar, which I really like the concept of that you have to save the city in peril. You know, he's in no danger, but sadly the game itself was pretty mid from what I understand, but decent concept at least. I wish a better game would have picked it up.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say Spider-Man for the 2600 was another one of those games too, which ended up being really good. It was like a simpler version of Crazy Climber.
Yeah, that tracks. That makes sense.
Yeah. Batman, on the other hand, that's iffy.
I forgot there was a Batman game for the 2600.
There's not.
Oh, sorry, I spaced out.
There was going to be an Incredible Hulk game, but it got canceled.
Oh, alas.
There is that Incredible Hulk text adventure where apparently you can dig to the center of the earth or something absolutely bizarre like that. I think you have to do that to get.
Probe one?
I think it might have been. I think it was a Quest Probe game.
Yeah.
Girl Boss quoted for truth. Modern designers really need to feel shame they can't wrap their head around something done right in the Atari 2600.
Yes, he's got that completely right.
Wait, BL85, have you not played Sunsoft's Batman Genesis game? Because that one is actually very good. It's kind of like Shinobi.
You have to understand something about BL85.
Uh-oh.
He does not like the Genesis.
Ooch.
And you say my opinion on Super Mario Brothers 3 is a hot take.
And I keep telling him about all the great stuff he's missing out on, but he's like, no way. Super Nintendo's the greatest thing ever made.
I understand your enmity against Super Nintendo fans now.
To be fair, he's also very big on the PC Engine.
Oh. Okay,
So,
well, that's cool.
And he does like the Sega Master System.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
I mean, we all have our biases. Like, I think, like, 99% of, like, British computer games are crap, but...
And to be fair, the British would tell you the exact same thing.
most, I guess. There are a few devoted fanboys, talking about, like, Jet Set Willy or what have you.
Yeah, they'll show
I
you their
remember
Willy
this.
all right.
I remember this one guy on YouTube who praised Strider Returns as the greatest thing since sliced bread, saying it was even better than Strider.
God, no.
He was kind of touched in the head, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, probably.
I mean, if he's talking about the home computer versions, microcomputer versions, whatever you want to call them.
Oh no, it was the Mega Drive.
Okay, I was gonna say because at least you turn into a robot in the computer versions of that game.
Tor. Yeah, though, but I fail to understand this bias against the Genesis. It's like, dude, the console wars are over. We all won.
Yeah.
You know, honestly, that's a good way of looking at it, especially when you compare it to modern console wars.
Yeah, it's not even
The
go there.
Gears year. We should do a podcast on the Gears years. That's one where
You
I'd
and me,
like to
Sotenga,
shine.
at some point, yes. I feel like this is a good format. You know, break it up every so many streams because this
I'd
worked
have
out
to
pretty
be your
well.
Warner Muppet on that one.
You would, yeah. I mean, you definitely give input on the 7th Gen because I know that you did get a few games from there at least.
That's the
But-
360 era.
Yes.
Yes, 360, PS3, and Wii.
Yeah, if you were to ever see my 360 collection, it's very oddball.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Hey,
only
between
oddball in the way you are.
But between the compilations and see now, okay, he finally admits to something.
Yes, Rocket Knight Adventures. That one's excellent.
That's such a great game.
The greatest game to come out of the also ran glut of Sonic likes. That one won by not being really much like Sonic at all, and it was just a really damn good action game.
Yeah, they
Yeah, the
balanced the
only other
speed
one-
element.
Yes.
The only other one I consider to be even close to Rocket Knight is High Seas Havoc.
That's one I need to get on more. It's a very quality game. It's also one that's apparently really difficult. And hey, Hyperstone Heist, another good one. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. BL85, we'll make a Genesis fan out of you. Yeah, you can believe that 99% of the library is crap, but that 1% is very much worth holding on to.
Musha.
So. Yes, Musha's excellent.
And I believe you own a complete and box copy of that, Sotenga?
Might.
One of these
Actually,
days I'll have to
if I
trade
have-
my house for that.
I forget if I have the manual, actually. So
Oh, okay.
that
Well,
might
that's
cost
still
some
very
points, but-
valuable.
No kidding.
I choose to plead the fifth on the Musha issue.
Ah,
That's
yes.
fair. That's fair.
I will say though, if my friend Nurseburf ever listens to this, she'll be very happy I mentioned High Seas Havoc.
That is
He
a
said
game I
Musha
want
and the
to...
stream almost crashes. Oh, alas.
Yeah, it might crash again, but
And Sonic would definitely be another discussion for another time, because my opinion has been very back and forth on the series, I will say.
And you know where I stand on that, so dang it.
Yep, and I know where Snarb stands with that as well, so that'd make a very nice id ego, super ego sort of chat, I'm sure.
right.
Yes.
Okay, well, if the stream has almost crashed for a third time, we're gonna have to turn in. My alarm on my phone just went off telling me it's midnight. So, well, that was a great.
Yep. And also,
Oh yeah, go ahead.
just to say, Prime is very correct.
They really did, yes. Any Konami game on the Genesis is quality. There's not that many of them, but they're all worth tracking down, except for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters. That one is...
That
Yeah,
one
that was a
looks
miss.
great. Plays not quite as well. There's at least a ROM hack for it that lets you play as the bosses now, so that's good.
Oh yeah, right. And the Genesis port of Sunset Riders was
They made the wrong choice with that.
Weird.
They could have gone with a higher ROM size. And be able to be
weird.
more with it.
Yeah, it really had to be compromised, and the result is a very weird outcome, I feel. But then the SNES was, I would say it was a perfect port, but for some reason I find it harder than the arcade version. I don't know how that worked out.
That's because it is. But I'd say, as far as what Prime was saying, the only other company that does it even better than Konami is Treasure.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Rad. Definitely.
So, but yeah, this is.
Oh. Not here, Bathroom, not here. Hyper So Nice
Oh,
is
no.
the Jiddo.
Yes,
it is.
I love that one.
That is one of the only Turtles games I held on to after the Purge.
I should stream it sometime soon, and if I may, at this point, I would like to plug the fact that I stream, like, I don't really have a set schedule. Sometimes I do it Monday, sometimes I don't. I would advertise on Twitter. My thoughts on Twitter are very conflicted right now.
Everybody's are mixed right now, but yeah, definitely don't be afraid to pimp that out. I linked to you on YouTube. You're one of the channels along with Dyer and Betty. That
Yeah,
I,
hey, if
linked
anyone
to.
wants to follow my Twitch channel, there you have it.
Yep, and for that matter, yeah, Dyer and Betty. Currently, we're premiering videos every Wednesday at noon, and we've got a couple of distinct ones we're doing. There's the regular Dyer and Betty. There's also the Dyer Plays videos and the Dyer and Betty Shorts.
Yeah,
Some very
definitely
good
give that a
stuff.
watch. Oh, sorry.
No, you're good, you're good.
So, but yeah. Oh, also one other thing I wanted to mention before we go, because Snarboo, I seem to remember you wanting to mention this,
Yeah, go for it.
and just even though the site itself hasn't been updated in God knows how long, I'm also the guy who see Prime knows.
That's Betty's catchphrase. I love it.
Yep. But I am also the guy who came up with the OPCFG.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely wanted you
That
to
was-
mention that.
Which was instrumental in shaping quite a bit of my own thoughts on games as well. If I
A
do
lot of
say so.
people actually, if what I remember is correct.
Mhm.
But yeah, the Organization for the Preservation of Classic Forms of Gaming started 1998. That's how long I've been doing this for.
You were retro before retro was cool.
And of course, special thanks to Kurt Collada for going and getting me started with that.
Yep. Go check out Hardcore Gaming 101. I used to write for it. I don't anymore because I feel very creatively bankrupt. But it's some good stuff, and I hang out on their Discord quite a bit nowadays. So yeah, I don't know how many other plugs I can or should throw out. But
Yes,
yeah,
he
Kurt-
does.
Kurt's a rad guy. I keep in touch with him every now and again, and Taxes suck in New Jersey. He's made that very apparent lately.
Ooh.
Yes. And I also, not only did I work with him on the OPCFG, but I had also uh, was, I guess you could say, the co-author of the Hardcore Gaming 101 Digest Volume 3, The Guide to Retro Horror, which, if I remember, Sotenga, you also contributed to that.
Yeah, I think so too. I just wish I
So-
could remember what. This is how bad my memory is.
And speaking of books, of course, I mentioned memoirs at the start of the stream, and you have several stories in that as well.
I do, yes. If you want to read my thoughts on Bubsy, it is quite an entertaining read, so yeah.
Or his thoughts on Mabu from Rolling Thunder.
The haunter of my dreams, yes.
I mean, he does have that mask-like face. That's gonna be creepy for just about anyone. But
He was even creepier than Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin mask in Spider-Man 2002. But yeah.
I also want to go ahead and give an additional shout out here as far as memoirs is concerned, because Scroll Boss did the cover.
he did. Nice.
That guy doesn't suck. Definitely check out his art on Twitter. I believe at Squirrelboss. So
And on Instagram.
rad. I still need to get on the Instagram train.
Yeah, you'll find a few people there who are here right now, like Bathroom of the Future, BL85.
Nice.
So, all right. So after that congratulatory round of backslapping,
Thank you, Ira Stephen Bear. I don't know if that's an in joke or not, but Deep Space Nine did not have the best final episode. That's all I'm saying.
yeah, sadly, but yeah, we'll definitely have to do this again sometime.
Yes.
I had a lot of fun. Defos.
Well, as for me, well, I stream regularly, usually about twice a week. The days are kind of all over the place. Usually, if Sotenga doesn't stream, I'll pick up the slack. And I'll be returning to the rental rodeo format. I actually took a brief break from it to just stream a bunch of mediocre DOS games. Those will be up on YouTube eventually. I think some of them might even be in my VODs if you just want to see my style of streaming. But yeah, I'll be returning to that, and I wasn't able to bring it up for this live cast, but I'm going to be discussing something very interesting with the next episode. A kind of form of rental that most people haven't encountered. In fact, I'm not sure if anybody else has encountered it, at least that I know personally in any case. And with
If it's the one I'm thinking of, then I know I never did.
right, it's just very different, very exotic. So I'll have to definitely bring that up. So with that, I will close out this stream. Thank you all for joining and chatting with us, and look forward to the next one of these, or just the next stream in general. Check out Dyer and Betty, check out Sotenga's stuff, and yeah, take it all easy and have a good night. Thanks for stopping by.